Chapter 2445, The Reign of Terror, 2. It was outrageous. Jian Wushuang's horrifying killing spree. In less than half a day, more than 150 disciples were killed. Among those disciples, the weakest were not ordinary second-class divine demons but genius disciples from various sections. All of them were treated as treasures in their sections. Every single loss was painful for those sects, but Jian Wushuang killed them like lambs. He's crazy. Jian Wushuang is simply a killing machine. I heard he's only in his 20s this year and already has strong murderous intent at such a young age. What would he become if he's allowed to live? Kill him. He must be killed. I must kill this demon to avenge my disciples who died. Many sects experts were enraged. If Jian Wushuang had offended more than 10 or even 20 sects in merely one of his massacres, he had offended more than half of the sects in Wuxia wilderness after his half-a-day killing spree. Those sects could not wait to kill Jian Wushuang. In a corner of the plains, the three elders of Narcissus Island were put under more pressure as Jian Wushuang killed even more. Matters are getting out of hand and completely beyond our control, said Elder Lingyi coldly. I think Jian Wushuang did nothing wrong. Those people were after his head, so he didn't need to show them any mercy, commented Elder Wujian. That's true, but we have too many sects involved now. Jian Wushuang had offended most of the sects in Wuxia wilderness. Even if Jian Wushuang could get out of the tomb in one piece, I'm afraid he will have to endure the assassination of various sections. I'm afraid that neither we nor Narcissus Island can protect him, said the seventh elder. The killings were so crazy with many genius disciples killed. Such matters had not occurred for a long time in Wuxia wilderness. There was without a doubt that Jian Wushuang's crazy massacre had aroused public outrage. Under all of the sect's extreme anger and pressure, Narcissus Island was unable to defend Jian Wushuang. Now that young man can only look out for himself. Elder Wujian sighed. He had never expected such a situation. Initially, he thought as long as Jian Wushuang could make it out alive from the tomb, Narcissus Island would protect him under its wings. It did not seem to be the case anymore. Jian Wushuang was sauntering inside the saint's tomb. He had no idea where he was heading, so he just kept walking and killing wherever he went. His expression remained calm and unwavering. In his previous life, Jian Wushuang had seen scenes that were countless times crazier than this. He had killed innumerable people to the point he was numb. Killing merely more than 100 genius disciples did not affect him at all. The disciples are getting smarter now. Jian Wushuang scanned the area with his soul power. He could sense that many disciples gathered in the void near him, but no one acted rashly. They were just tailing him and making sure he did not disappear from their sights. Anyway, nothing could be done. Initially, those sect's genius disciples wanted to rely on their own abilities to kill Jian Wushuang and monopolize the reward, but they had finally come to their senses after half a day. It was impossible to kill Jian Wushuang with merely one or two sects joined forces. They had to join forces with more powerful experts if they were going to take Jian Wushuang out. At least 10 sects had to join forces, and perhaps about 100 or even hundreds of disciples would have to besiege Jian Wushuang in an effort to kill him. Therefore they could only wait to round up more people. Jian Wushuang was aware of their plans but could not be bothered. As long as those disciples did not take the initiative to attack him, he would not want to start a fight. However, he would be merciless once his opponent struck the first attack. He would kill all of them if he could, regardless of which sect they belonged to or what kind of background they had. After all, he had already upset many sections. In his opinion, killing was still killing regardless of whether it was only one person or 10,000 people. Similarly, offending one sect or a few sects was anyhow still offending. If all the sects in Saint's Tomb tried to kill him in exchange for the reward, he would not hesitate to wipe all of them out. As time went by, more and more genius disciples gathered around Jian Wushuang. I'm afraid it won't be long before people from the Great Compassionate sect arrive? Jian Wushuang muttered. During the half-day massacre, he killed too fast and had not come across people of the Great Compassion sect. However, as many sects had gathered around him, news about his location would have traveled fast. The Great Compassion sect would definitely be on their way as soon as possible. Jian Wushuang's expression changed as he lifted his head to look forward. There were 5 figures standing in his way in front of him. There was only one first-class divine demon while the other 4 were only second-class divine demon. They were probably from an ordinary sect. What took Jian Wushuang by surprise was that they neither stepped aside nor attempted to kill him like the other ordinary sect disciples when they saw him. They merely stood in front of him and had no intention to move aside and give way to him. Jian Wushuang faintly smiled and moved forward to greet the group. Senior brother Jian Wushuang is here. A second-class divine demon among the 5 figures nervously quipped. I know. The first-class divine demon among those 5 nodded heavily with a hint of terror in his eyes when he looked at Jian Wushuang. Who would dare to stand in Jian Wushuang's way? Don't worry, we aren't his opponents. This first-class divine demon strived to maintain his composure. He immediately bowed and saluted when Jian Wushuang appeared before him. Su Nan from Ice Fire God Palace has met senior brother Wushuang. Ice Fire God Palace? Jian Wushuang's heart moved, and he finally understood why the 5 people in front did not avoid him. So, you are from the Ice Fire God Palace? How's my second brother doing in your place? Jian Wushuang smiled. The Ice Fire God Palace was a small sect in the Wuxia wilderness. Jian Wushuang knew them because his second brother, Zhuopeng, was a disciple of Ice Fire God Palace. Chapter 2446. Trapped. Su Nan's group breathed a sigh of relief when Jian Wushuang acknowledged their sect. Zhuopeng is now undergoing cultivation training in Ice Fire God Palace and making great progress. He has mentioned you many times. Unfortunately, he's not here in Saint's Tomb as his cultivation level is still rather low, explained Su Nan. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly before waving his hand and taking out an interspatial ring. There are many purple amulets in this interspatial ring which I've collected in the past half-day. I will now give it to you. I hope you will take care of my second brother in the Ice Fire God Palace. Su Nan took the interspatial ring. After glancing at it briefly, his face showed a pleasant surprise before he said, Senior brother Wushuang, don't worry. We as Zhuopeng seniors will definitely assist in his growth. I appreciate your efforts, said Jian Wushuang before he turned and left. Su Nan and his team of 5 were stoked upon watching Jian Wushuang leave. I know that we can get lots of benefits if we look for senior brother Wushuang now. Isn't that true? Su Nan said with a smile. Jian Wushuang must have accumulated many treasures after killing so many genius disciples in this short span of less than half a day. The number of purple amulets obtained was innumerable. Those rare treasures were useful, but there were just too many purple amulets. For the sake of his second brother Zhuopeng, he did not mind giving them some purple amulets. Senior brother Su Nan, you are smart. Is it all right if we accept Jian Wushuang's gifts in front of so many disciples? Asked a disciple of the Ice and Fire God Palace nervously. It's Jian Wushuang who killed their disciples, not us. Well, just ignore them if they find fault with us. Let's go. Su Nan led those few Ice Fire God Palace disciples and quickly left. The other sect's genius disciples also ignored them. Jian Wushuang continued moving forward in the void, and he simply stopped when he passed a desolate hill. He sat cross-legged on the hill and closed his eyes. He stopped. The many genius disciples who followed Jian Wushuang around also stopped. So, you aren't going to escape anymore? Humph, how could he escape under so many pairs of eyes? It's better to find a place to sit down, regain his strength, and prepare for the last battle. Not necessarily. I feel that he never wanted to escape from the beginning. He's way too powerful and we may not even be able to take him down on our own. Let's wait until the Great Compassionate Sect arrives. The Great Compassionate Sect is already on their way and will be here soon. There were approximately dozens of sects which gathered around Jian Wushuang and perhaps a total of more than 200 genius disciples. Even then, those genius disciples did not act rashly. They had no confidence to do it. All of them were scared witless by Jian Wushuang's crazy massacre. Many genius disciples who were first-class divine demons had been killed. None of them wanted to be sacrificed under Jian Wushuang's sword. Therefore, without absolute certainty, they dared not act on impulse. Wait. Although those genius disciples had an insatiable hunger for the position token on Jian Wushuang and his head, they could only remain patient and wait for the Great Compassion Sect disciples' arrival. Jian Wushuang was also patiently waiting. It did not take long. More than 20 figures appeared at an astonishing speed from a distance in the void. The Great Compassionate Sect is here. The eyes of those sect disciples who had been waiting for a long time instantly lit up. In just a brief moment, those 20 figures appeared in front of the hill where Jian Wushuang was. They were led by a young man wearing purple armor, Long Zishan. Next to Long Zishan was a beautiful woman in a white robe who had a cold demeanor. That gorgeous woman was Yu Aoqing, another 12 minor kings belonging to the Great Compassion Sect, and was ranked 8th. Yu Aoqing I, as her name depicted, was an extremely cold and proud person. Jian Wushuang. Long Zishan immediately darted his razor-sharp gaze directly at Jian Wushuang, who was on the hill when he appeared. Is he Jian Wushuang? Yu Aoqing also looked at Jian Wushuang, but both her eyes and expressions were extremely cold. As for the other Great Compassion Sect disciples, they were gritting their teeth with anger. The Great Compassion Sect had always been arrogant and many were accustomed to their behavior. As that was the case, their disciples were used to being aloof before disciples of other sections. The other sects' disciples were usually submissive towards the Great Compassion Sect disciples, but this time they suffered a big loss in Jian Wushuang's hands. Besides several core disciples who were beheaded by Jian Wushuang, even Pang Tao was killed. That did not only instigated provocation toward the Great Compassion Sect but also shamed their disciples. The shame could only be thoroughly washed away if Jian Wushuang was cut 1,000 times. When many Great Compassion Sect disciples arrived, Jian Wushuang, who was sitting on the hill, slowly opened his eyes. "Finally here? You guys are really slow." Jian Wushuang smiled indifferently, but there was a trace of mockery in his voice. "Jian Wushuang, I really admire you. You have offended all the sections. Each sect's genius disciples are chasing after you. You are just like a street rat being besieged and you are still laughing?" Long Zishan stared at Jian Wushuang. "A street rat? This adjective is not appropriate. After all, have you ever seen a cat being wantonly slaughtered by a street rat? As for being trapped, that's not the case at all. At least, you people are not capable of doing that to me." Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. Long Zishan's gazes were extremely cold. "Really? Jian Wushuang, I admit that I had underestimated you before. Even junior brother Pang Tao died in your hands, but do you think you will have another chance now?" "Junior sister Aoqing, you and I will strike together," whispered Long Zishan. "Together?" Yu Aoqing was surprised. Both of them were 12 minor kings with one ranked 3rd and the other 8th. They were both aloof and haughty at heart. Yu Aoqing was reluctant to join forces with Long Zishan as their opponent was a chaotic realm younger generation disciple. One Yu Aoqing means arrogance or proud. Chapter 2447, War. Long Zishan explained as if he could read Yu Aoqing's mind. Jian Wushuang could so unscrupulously kill junior brother Pang Tao and many various sects' genius disciples. I'm 80% certain that his power is above mine. Not only you and I are going to join forces, but they will also have to launch an attack together. Long Zishan's final sentence was directed to the few Great Compassion Sect's first-class divine demons. There were a total of 4 Great Compassion Sect first-class divine demons apart from Long Zishan and Yu Aoqing who had just arrived. The 4 first-class divine demons nodded in unison after hearing Long Zishan's words. Yu Aoqing's eyes were locked on her target and solemnly nodded. "Let's go." Following Long Zishan's low command grunt, the 6 first-class divine demons concurrently aimed their attacks at Jian Wushuang. Long Zishan took the lead as the strongest among the 6. The purple armor on Long Zishan was glowing in a faint purple light, while a dark purple spear was in his hand. A cyclone from vague purple divine powers formed under his feet as he made his move, making it seem as though he was stepping on a purple dragon. He was moving extremely fast, appearing first in front of Jian Wushuang. "Go to hell." Long Zishan's eyes shone like they were filled with electricity and the dark purple spear in his hand instantly turned into a bolt of purple lightning and whizzed towards Jian Wushuang. Long Zishan is much more powerful than Pang Tao. Jian Wushuang murmured his admiration towards Long Zishan in his heart, after judging Long Zishan's skill when he made that attack. Jian Wushuang also reacted immediately. A sword intent rose sharply. Jian Wushuang's eyes flickered sharply as he drew his sword and swept it around. His actions were smooth and coherent. Swash! A poignant sword light emerged. A very gorgeous and extremely enchanting faint purplish sword light cut through the void, just like a purple phantom gliding past. Purple blood sword technique, purple light phantom. They were both purple, but one resembled a flash of purple lightning while the other was a poignant purple sword light. The two instantly collided. Snap! A crisp sound rang in the void followed by before a purple arc and sword lights filled the space. Jian Wushuang smiled indifferently as the two collided before casually swiping across his Blood Mountain sword and dividing its sword intent into 3 cold sword light streaks that were directed at Long Zishan. Long Zishan was neither afraid nor perturbed. The dark purple spear in his hand shot out and pierced one after another. Clang, clang, clang. All of Jian Wushuang's 3 sword lights were impeded. At that instant, Jian Wushuang lunged forward and a surge of sword intent spread out like waves in a boundless ocean, instantly oppressing Long Zishan's body and the surrounding void. A series of invisible sword lights appeared out of thin air and those sword lights engulfed Long Zishan from every direction. Such a weird sword technique. Long Zishan's expression changed. Under the coverage of those sword lights, Long Zishan had to defend himself with all his strength as he retreated. The two were exchanging moves, and it was obvious that Long Zishan was at a disadvantage. However, Long Zishan was no longer Jian Wushuang's opponent. At the same time, while Jian Wushuang was fighting Long Zishan, that cold woman, Yu Aoqing, had disappeared. The moment Jian Wushuang repelled Long Zishan, he felt chills crept up his back. Jian Wushuang was instantly alerted. Swash! A cyclone was formed out of thin air, and in the center of the cyclone, a jet-black dagger came straight out. The dagger exuded an astonishing gleam of phantom-like chilliness and went straight for Jian Wushuang's back. Yu Aoqing, the dagger's owner, had an extremely cold expression on her face. Swish! The dagger penetrated Jian Wushuang's body, but surprisingly it did not hit any tangible matter. Instead, it made an air-cutting sound. The dagger stabbed nothing but air. Was that just a shadow? That's fast. Yu Aoqing squinted her eyes slightly before instantly located Jian Wushuang's location and creeping up beside him. Jian Wushuang casually raised his hand and wielded his sword. It was an ordinary sword movement that seemed powerless, yet it had completely held Yu Aoqing captive. Yu Aoqing was unable to evade, forcing her to discharge her divine powers to parry off that attack. Clang! There was a low and muffled impact sound. Yu Aoqing's figure was slightly shaken. The dagger in her hand collided with the sword light, resulting in its directional change, but she still managed to resist the sword attack. Swoosh! Yu Aoqing's figure backed away and pulled some distance apart from Jian Wushuang. Be careful, he is very fast. His sword techniques are also very strange and terrifying, shouted Yu Aoqing in a low voice. Long Zishan, as well as the other 4 Great Compassion Sect first-class Divine Demons disciples, had also noticed the same issues. Don't fight against him one-on-one, use the 4-elephant formation, shouted Long Zishan. The 4 Great Compassion Sect first-class Divine Demons disciples exchanged glances and nodded. The very next moment, the 4 emanated their auras, which merged into a powerful entity under their formation. Swoosh! Those 4 first-class Divine Demons simultaneously moved. All 4 of them attacked, but Jian Wushuang felt like it was coming from only one person. Is that a formation? Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes. He could not help but started to admire how incomparable the other sects in the Wuxia wilderness were to the Great Compassion Sect. He had killed so many other sects' genius disciples in the past half a day, yet he had never encountered such a formation that could fully integrate a team's combat power as one and unleashed its full potential like how those 4 first-class Divine Demons had just done. The 4 had a tacit understanding of each other and worked well together, making the formation's power greater. The formation did not add up their combat power like 1 + 1 but multiplied it by multiple folds. It was obvious that when the 4 first-class Divine Demons teamed up, they gave Jian Wushuang a much more terrifying feeling than ordinary peak Divine Demons. Long Zishan's combat power was no less than a peak Divine Demon, but the threat and pressure Long Zishan brought to Jian Wushuang were no greater than the current 4 first-class Divine Demons altogether. The 4 joined forces and didn't give me a chance to break them apart. That's quite smart, murmured Jian Wushuang while still being extremely relaxed. Kill him. One of the 4 murderous first-class Divine Demons waved a giant axe in his hand. Bang! A towering axe's shadow appeared out of thin air and went down full force on Jian Wushuang. This power has definitely reached the peak Divine Demon realm, exclaimed Jian Wushuang as his figure swayed and left a few space-time shadows behind. The axe cut through those shadows but never managed to land a hit on Jian Wushuang's physical body. Chapter 2448, Subdued, Too Fast. He was just too fast. We must impede his speed, otherwise our attacks will not reach him at all, said a first-class Divine Demon from the Great Compassion Sect. Long Zishan looked at Yu Aoqing. Junior Sister Aoqing. Let me handle him. Yu Aoqing's face was cold. A gray gem that was exuding a strange aura miraculously appeared in her hand. The gray gem was filled with surging gray energies, and Yu Aoqing's divine power brought those gray mist out from the gray gem. The gray mist in a speedy manner covered the area far and wide. In just a blink of an eye, Jian Wushuang was instantly engulfed in the mist. He could feel a strong force oppressing his movements. Is this the power of a domain treasure? Jian Wushuang stole a look at the gray gem before shaking his head thereafter. It's indeed a domain treasure, but a very low-level one. It's probably just an ordinary domain treasure, murmured Jian Wushuang. Domain treasures were extremely rare, both in the eternal chaotic world of his previous life and the ancient god domain of his current life. Such treasures were scarce. Although Yu Aoqing was the top genius in the Wuxia wilderness, she was still only a divine demon. It was hard enough for her to come up with such a rare domain treasure, let alone bringing out some extremely precious domain treasures. I'm afraid you can't limit my speed with just a domain treasure, sneered Jian Wushuang. A single domain treasure is of course not enough, but how about adding this? Yu Aoqing grunted and a stream of black current flowed from her. It soon filled the area and combined perfectly with the gray mist. The pressures on Jian Wushuang's body greatly increased the moment both of them coalesced. Oh, a domain secret technique? Jian Wushuang's expression flickered. The gray mist was released from that gray gem treasure. Whereas, the black current erupting from Yu Aoqing's divine power was obviously a remarkable domain secret technique. The perfect combination of both had increased the domain's effect by multiple folds. Swoosh. Jian Wushuang tried moving around, but his expression turned grim after just 2 simple movements. My speed had been reduced by nearly 50%? Jian Wushuang was shocked. The reduction of his speed by half was equivalent to 1 fold. Humph, you can only blame yourself for being in a lowly realm and your insufficiently strong divine power. If you are as strong as a first-class divine demon, I might only be able to suppress 30% of your speed at most. Yu Aoqing stared at Jian Wushuang and scoffed. His speed has been limited, which is equivalent to breaking his wings. I'll die for sure. Long Zishan's expression turned ferocious as his killing intent intensified. Purple lights erupted from his body while the purple cyclone got bigger under his feet. Boom. A fascinating bright purple light descended. Long Zishan appeared in front of Jian Wufang like a formidable god with his gleamingly dazzling purple light spear at hand. It's the Purple Thunder Divine Light Spear. Long Zishan's spear pierced forward. Even the sky seemed to be perforated. Jian Wushuang frowned as his speed had been restricted and he could not avoid the attack with only his current speed. He could only attempt to parry it with his sword. A head-on collision happened. Boom. Jian Wushuang fell backward. Haha, that's for sure. No matter how good you are, you're just a chaotic realm. Your divine power is after all far inferior to first-class divine demons. As long as your speed is restricted, you won't be able to display your sword techniques. In that case you are not my match at all. Long Zishan let out a hearty laugh. An excited look appeared on the faces of Yu Aoqing and the 4 first-class divine demons who formed the 4-elephant formation. They lunged forward to Jian Wushuang without wasting any time. Under the extreme speed limitations, Jian Wushuang was unable to perform his strange and terrifying sword techniques. He was completely subdued by those few people from the Great Compassion sect. Boom, boom, boom. The war began. A large number of various sects' genius disciples gathered somewhere near the battlefield as witnesses. Among the crowd was an extremely weak-looking girl in red who squatted there. Hong Luo. The girl heard a noise, turned towards the void's direction, and saw 2 figures rushing towards her. Oh, Huanchen and Huiyang. The 2 of you. What's the matter? The girl in red had a strange expression. Of course we have something to bring up. The young man in a white robe replied with a polite smile. That young man was called Huanchen. Just like Huiyang and Hong Luo, he was also one of the 12 minor kings. Huiyang was ranked 10th among them. Hong Luo was ranked 5th. Huanchen, who ranked even higher than Long Zishan, was ranked 2nd. He was the most powerful and terrifying among all of them. In Wuxia wilderness, Huanchen had always been regarded as the ultimate expert who was second only to Tu Qianqing. Tu Qianqing had not entered the saint's tomb because he had broken through and reached the peak divine demon realm. Due to that, Huanchen should be the strongest among the disciples in the tomb. Unfortunately, Jian Wushuang had taken away his limelight. Hong Luo, don't tell me you're just going to stay here all this time and watch the great compassionate sect disciples behead Jian Wushuang, bagging both his position token and the rewards on his head, said Huanchen with a smile. Well, that's my plan. Can I do that? Hong Luo gave an insouciant reply. Well, you can. It's just a pity in this case as Jian Wushuang has caused too much trouble in the tomb and offended countless sections. Those sects have put a bounty on his head which has since increased. It seems that killing him will reap much greater benefits than getting a position token, commented Huanchen. Huanchen, just be frank and tell me what's on your mind. Don't go beating around the bush like this, said Hong Luo impatiently. Huanchen was taken aback momentarily and then smiled. Then it'll be straightforward. I've already discussed this with Huiyang. Later, when those great compassion sects people push Jian Wushuang to dead ends, we'll immediately take action before them and finish him off so that the position token in his hand and the bounty on his head would be ours. However, this is a heist against the great compassion after all. Huiyang and I are outnumbered. That's why we're here for you. Chapter 2449, Hidden Cards? So, You want me to join forces with you? Hong Luo's attention was piqued. Yes, Long Zishan could only suffer in silence if both of us join forces, as there's nothing he can do to us, even if we snatch Jian Wushuang's head from the Great Compassion sect. What do you think, Hong Luo? Huan Chen smiled. I refuse. Hong Luo curtly shook her head. Huan Chen's and Hui Yang's complexion changed. Hong Luo, are you worried about the Great Compassion sect? Hui Yang asked quizzically. The Great Compassion sect is rich, so they don't care about the bounty. They just want to kill Jian Wushuang, avenge Pang Tao, and save their faces. As for whether Jian Wushuang died in their hands, it doesn't really matter. We may irritate Long Zishan if we do this, but we'll never rub the Great Compassion sect wrongly. You don't have to worry about it, said Huan Che. I refuse to join not because I'm worried about offending the Great Compassionate sect, but I've never wanted to attack Jian Wushuang, said Hong Luo. What? Huan Chen and Hui Yang were startled. Well, Jian Wushuang did nothing to provoke me and none of our sect's disciples was killed. Why should I kill him? Just for the bounty? Sorry, I'm not very interested in those rewards, said Hong Luo bluntly. If this is the case, so be it. Huan Chen and Hui Yang no longer lingered around and left. Hong Luo could not help but sneer in her heart as she glanced at Huan Chen's back. What a hypocrite. He's polite to everyone on the surface but secretly is as cunning as a fox. Who knows what will happen if I were to join forces with him? Hong Luo could read Huan Chen like an open book. There were so many genius disciples in the saint's tomb that Hong Luo was spoiled with choices. Even if she was to join forces with someone, she would have never considered Huan Chen. Of course, Huan Chen's behavior was not the only reason Hong Luo refused, but the most important point was she never wanted to kill Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang is simply a super monster. I'm afraid that's unprecedented in the Wuxia wilderness. Although he has become a target for many and seems to be cornered, yet judging from his expressions and demeanors, he's not panicking or nervous in the slightest. Instead, he is still wearing a confident appearance. Hong Luo squinted slightly, not wanting to miss a single expression on Jian Wushuang's face. He could maintain such calmness and confidence even in such a crisis. He must be either an idiot who does not know the complexity of the world or still has a stronger trump card in his hand. It would be good if he died here. However, if he is to survive after this disaster, there will no longer be any sects in Wuxia wilderness that can threaten him. Instead, those sects will be shivering because they have got on his wrong side in Saint's tomb. I better stay away from such a monster. Hong Luo was extremely good at reading people, or rather very intuitive. Her instinct told her that she must not rub Jian Wushuang on the wrong side. The war continued on the battlefield. Those Great Compassion sect's 6 disciples. Long Zishan, who ranked 3rd among the 12 minor kings, was considered one of the top peak divine demons. His divine powers were extremely pure and his spear skills were remarkable. Jian Wushuang was completely not his match if they were to fight head-on. On the one hand, Yu Aoqing was controlling 2 domains to completely limit Jian Wushuang's speed, while at the same time, she was playing her skills and speed to their best. Her body was moving like a phantom, repeatedly appearing behind or beside Jian Wushuang when he was fighting against Long Zishan. Her dagger stabbed out over and over again. It could have easily caused Jian Wushuang a fatal injury if he was not careful. Lastly, there were the Great Compassion sect's other 4 first-class divine demons. Initially, those 4 first-class divine demons were Jian Wushuang's easiest opponents to deal with, as he could rely on his speed to break their attacks previously. However, as the 4 disciples formed the 4-elephant formation, which was capable of both attack and defense, they had become extremely powerful, putting a large amount of pressure on Jian Wushuang. Under the Sax's siege, Jian Wushuang gradually lost support and his defeat seemed to be a foregone conclusion. Jian Wushuang, I thought your strength was amazing before, but it seems that it's nothing great now. As long as we restrict your speed, you'll not be able to fully display your strength and sword techniques. I see that you have a merely average peak divine demon realm combat strength. I'm afraid there was only an element of luck when you killed senior brother Pang Tao earlier. You will die today without a doubt. Long Zishan's sarcastic voice echoing within the space as his attacks towards Jian Wushuang with his spear was getting more swift and abhorrent. Jian Wushuang was wielding his sword with one hand and with his somewhat solemn complexion. Under the suppression of 2 domains, his speed was hampered such that even his strength was greatly reduced. It was tough for him to face 6 opponents at the same time. Young man, what are you going to do next? In that hidden independent space, the Crimson Stone Saint was observing his battle. He did not think that Jian Wushuang had been driven to a desperate situation. He could see that Jian Wushuang's composure remained calm since the beginning, without a trace of irritation. Now show me what you've got. The Crimson Stone Saint was anticipating. Jian Wushuang sighed helplessly on the battlefield. Old man, looks like you're getting what you want, murmured Jian Wushuang. Of course he was addressing the Crimson Stone Saint. He knew all along what Crimson Stone Saint's objective was, and being placed in such a situation, he had no choice but to show his cards. Otherwise, not mentioning the many sect's disciples still hovering around and ready to take action against him at any time, even his fight against the Great Compassion sect's 6 disciples before him was proving to be difficult. Oh well, look closely since you want to see my cards. I wonder if you have the vision of Mu Xiaoxiao, sneered Jian Wushuang. At that instant, boom. The stellar strength within Jian Wushuang's body exploded. The stellar secret technique was awakened. The stellar strength had long been integrated into his Buddhist divine powers and even his blood. Now that he had released its strength, his divine powers instantly began to change. Everyone was keeping an eye on Jian Wushuang in the middle of the battlefield. Huan Qin and Hui Yang were ready to take action. Jian Wushuang's aura was getting thicker at an astonishing speed under everyone's gaze. Previously he was only at the peak chaotic realm or perhaps half-step divine demon realm. However, his aura was getting more and more powerful with the rapid changes he was undergoing. He had soon broken through and achieved third-class divine demon realm. His strength and power soared instantly. Chapter 2450, Heaven and Earth Aligns. Did his divine power energy just become more powerful? Everyone around noticed the changes in Jian Wushuang's energy. His cultivation level seemed to have increased. He probably performed a certain secret technique. Be extra careful. Long Zishan frowned before immediately looking towards those around him. Right at that moment, Jian Wushuang had already raised his head once again. A horrifying divine power had violently emerged with a rumble as he raised his head. The 2 layers of the domain that were pressing against him, the gray mist field and the black energy flow that covered the sky, were immediately affected by the divine power he was projecting, which greatly decreased its oppressive effects. No. Yao Qing was shocked. She had already sensed that the effects of her 2 domains on Jian Wushuang had been reduced quite a bit. Previously she could at least suppress half of Jian Wushuang's speed, but at this moment she could not even suppress 20% of it. Jian Wushuang moved once again and exploded with much faster and more terrifying speeds than before. Careful, junior sister. Long Zikan warned quietly. Yao Qing immediately reacted and steadily gazed over. Jian Wushuang's figure had appeared before her with his long sword already swung out. A blurry sword essence swept outwards. The time and space around were immediately frozen as ripples formed within the void. Spacetime sword technique. First form, cutting snow. His sword technique changed? Yao Qing's pupils shrunk slightly. Jian Wushuang had been using purple blood sword technique all the while when battling against them before. He pushed his speed to the limits with that absolutely strange technique. However, Jian Wushuang was using his own creation at this moment, the spacetime sword technique. The sword technique he created was naturally his best and strongest sword skill. Ring. A sword shadow charged towards Yao Qing and it was impossible for her to dodge it. However, in the end she was still one of the 12 minor kings. Her black dagger had been pushed out in an instant such that even the void formed into a swirl as a result from that stab. Clang. The sound of metals clashing was heard as a trace of fear flashed across Yao Qing's face. The dagger she was holding flew out of her hand as her figure instantly propelled backward. Fortunately, it was not life-threatening. At the same time, Long Zishan had already appeared on Jian Wushuang's side. Eat this, kid. Long Zishan's entire body was glowing bright with purple lights with traces of purple-colored electric bolts sparking out of his eyes. The long purple spear in his hand had turned into a huge purple lightning beam as it swept up with crackles and infinite power. Shuras God eliminating spear. Long Zishan shouted violently as the crackling lightning beam shot straight at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang steadied his eyes and sent Blood Mountain sword flatly outwards. His stab directly went to the middle of the purple lightning beam as a unique samsara strength swept outwards. Ring ring. The crackling purple lightning in the lightning beam had turned into purple-colored divine powers and dispersed towards every direction. What? Long Zishan was absolutely shocked. He did not expect that his most powerful strike was so easily dissolved by Jian Wushuang. At that instant, Jian Wushuang attacked with his sword again. Ring. A blurry sword light lit up and directly slashing at Long Zishan. The sword light was so incredibly fast that it was almost impossible to react to it. However, Long Zishan reacted very quickly by retracting his spear to block the attack in front of his face. Just as the sword light most touched his long spear, Something's not right. Long Zishan's heart skipped a beat as the purple battle armor he was wearing immediately projected a blinding golden lightning bolt and once again formed a purple lightning armor on the surface of his purple battle armor. There was no feeling of two weapons clashing just as his spear made contact with the blurry sword shadow. Instead, a beam of mysterious sword light had slashed on the layer of purple lightning armor. Samsara sword technique, Samsara empty strike. Empty yet solid. Illusionary yet real. As he took a frontal hit from Jian Wushuang, the purple lightning armor on the surface of Long Zishan's body immediately dimmed. At the same time, a mouthful of blood shot out from Long Zishan's oral cavity as his body flew out like a broken kite. In the blink of an eye, Jian Wushuang had warded off two experts, Yu Aoqing and Long Zishan. The four-elephant formation formed by those four great compassion sects first-class divine demon were the only ones left standing around Jian Wushuang like dumbfounded. Jian Wushuang's eyes seemed at a loss when he looked at those four. Although his eyes looked lost, the Blood Mountain sword in his hand was slowly raised. He swung his sword again. It was such a plain strike without sword lights or sword shadows bursting out of it and also without any vibrations around. The world remained extremely calm and quiet. However, an extremely fast sword shadow suddenly slashed open the void under the silence. Ring. A blinding sword light appeared out of nowhere. The sword light seemed to connect heaven and earth together. It was absolutely stunning and extremely bright. The moment when it appeared, it became the core and the focus of the world. It had even become eternal. There were many genius disciples from different sects around the battlefield and all of them were mesmerized by the sword light. That strike was so beautiful. 9 seas and 8 wilderness, heaven and earth align. Jian Wushuang mumbled to himself. That stroke had connected time and space, yin and yang, life and death, all on a single point. His name was Heaven and Earth Aligns. That stroke was something Jian Wushuang discovered when he was in the middle of his massacre at Saint's tomb. That stroke had included Jian Wushuang's understanding of the space-time law and was actually the second form of his space-time sword technique as well. Jian Wushuang had just created that form and this was the very first time it had been displayed. Everyone around was immersed in the sword light's absolute beauty. However, the four great compassion sects first-class divine demon in the middle of that sword light had their living souls frightened out of their bodies. The sword light slashed everything open from the moment it appeared, breaking the connections between four of them. Their four-elephant formation was completely shattered. However, the sword light's full potential was not fully unleashed. Quickly break the safety token. As one of the first-class divine demons spoke, the sword light had swept across their bodies before he could finish his sentence. Ring. The sword light had finally dissolved. Many disciples around the battlefield had finally snapped out of it. When they looked over again, they realized in the void where the sword light was at previously, those four great compassion sect first-class divine demon disciples had turned into badly decapitated corpses that were slowly falling downwards. The air had frozen at that moment. Huan Chen and Hao Yang were standing side by side on the edge of the battlefield, feeling incredibly stunned. They were planning to go forward and kill Jian Wushuang. However, who knew Jian Wushuang suddenly burst into action. Merely in the blink of an eye, Yu Aoqing was flown off after taking a frontal hit. Long Zishan suffered severe injury. The four great compassion sect's first-class divine demon disciples were eliminated directly. The table was completely turned. Chapter 2451. The Siege. The great compassion sect's Long Zishan, Yu Aoqing and four first-class divine demon disciples who formed the four-elephant formation were defeated while working together? Not only that, it was a devastating defeat. Long Zishan is badly injured. The four first-class divine demon disciples didn't even get the chance to break their safety tokens before they got cut down. The duration was too fast. Long Zishan and his group definitely had the upper hand a while ago, but the tables completely turned in only an instant. This Jian Wushuang is really scary. In the void surrounding the battlefield, there was already an emotional stir. The various sects' genius disciples were all stunned beyond words. Huoyang, let's do it. Huan Chen gave a soft cry. Now. Huoyang frowned. Their initial plan was to let Long Zishan and his group push Jian Wushuang to a corner and take advantage of the situation after that. However, Jian Wushuang's ability is beyond our imagination. We can't only rely on the great compassion sect disciples. We shouldn't wait anymore and must immediately take action. Only by working with Long Zishan and this lot could we have some hope to kill Jian Wushuang. Don't think too much, let's do it. Huan Chen's voice was frosty. All right. Huoyang stopped hesitating. The 212's minor king experts immediately moved. Many genius disciples from different sects besides them had similar plans like Huan Chen and Hui Yang. However, the abilities Jian Wushuang unleashed were completely out of their expectations. They had no choice but to take action earlier than planned. Charge. Well, do it together, only then can we possibly kill Jian Wushuang. Let's first kill Jian Wushuang. As for his head and the position token on him, that would depend on our individual skills. At that instant, dozens of individuals moved almost at the same time. All of those taking action were top geniuses from various sects, and every one of them was a first-class divine demon without a doubt. That was to be expected, as ever since the intense battle started, all of them could see Jian Wushuang's abilities. Against such a terrifying opponent, it would mean instant death if those second-class divine demon participated. Only first-class divine demons were qualified to make a move on Jian Wushuang and pose some threats toward him. Therefore, those who took action at that moment were 50 first-class divine demons. It was safe to say that more than half of the first-class divine demons who entered Saint's Tomb partake in the attack. Their target was Jian Wushuang. In addition, even though they came from different sects, they had a tacit understanding to first kill Jian Wushuang together before fighting for the position token in his possession as well as his head to be exchanged for those rewards. The tacit understanding came out of necessity since the abilities Jian Wushuang had shown were truly terrifying. Jian Wushuang continuously projected his soul power as he stood in the middle of the battlefield and immediately noticed when those 50 experts moved at the same time. Jian Wushuang raised his head, his eyes filled with a coldness like never before. Finally, can't hold back? All of you want my head in exchange for the rewards? If that's the case, bring it on. He'll have a hearty fight with each of you today until the heavens change its color. His cold voice was like the deep growl of death which lingered for a very long time as it resonated across the entire battlefield, Saint's Tomb, and space between heaven and earth. Jian Wushuang's divine power surged like a great wave as his voice died down. The divine power swiftly concentrated and very soon formed a gigantic golden divine god hologram. One of the 5 most powerful secret techniques of the 7 Stars Black Sect, Divine God of Punishment. With Jian Wushuang's cultivation level upgrade and radically strengthened divine powers, the formed divine god hologram was no longer just 300 meters like before, but reached 1,600 meters. The 1,600 meters divine god hologram was definitely much stronger than the previous 300 meters, despite it still being within the divine god of punishment first stage. Jian Wushuang immediately gave out a furious growl as the 1,600-meter tall golden divine god hologram appeared. Sweeping out like rolling waves was a stern growl. In the void surrounding him, the gray mist and black energy flow domains were still suppressing Jian Wushuang. However, after that growl, the gray mist completely retreated while the dark energy flow utterly vanished. Both domain layers that previously were oppressing Jian Wushuang disappeared into nothingness. Jian Wushuang's abilities had already reached the highest peak possible at that time. There's still more to this guy? Yu Aoqing was utterly shocked and terrified upon seeing both her imposed domains had perished. As for those geniuses who were frenziedly charging towards Jian Wushuang, they could not care any less, despite seeing the golden divine god hologram and noticing the transformation of his abilities. At the end of the day, there were 50 first-class divine demons attacking at the same time. Each of them was geniuses with extremely solid battle strength. They even had a few 12 minor kings among them and many other individuals whose abilities were close to the 12 minor kings. Nobody could withstand the power of that many people who joined the siege unless a real god appeared. Hence, Jian Wushuang should not be able to do so either. Kill? Kill him. Cold voices shouted one by one as those geniuses' killing intent was surging like a tall wave. Kill? Jian Wushuang's eyes also had a trace of redness, with his killing intent also sweeping out of his body, like a Shura who emerged from hell. His figure was violently moving fast towards those geniuses around him. He wanted to accept their attacks head-on. Die. Huan Qin and Hui Yang were charging on the forefront, becoming one of the earliest who crossed hands with Jian Wushuang. Huan Qin held a crimson-colored sickle in his hand as his bewitching eyes gazed at Jian Wushuang with a strange light. Ring. The formless soul attack had penetrated Jian Wushuang's mind. Unfortunately, Jian Wushuang was a perfect chaotic creature and a reincarnated soul. Although his soul cultivation level was slightly lower, he was still an incredibly strong individual. In addition to his soul was protected by the exquisite pagoda, Huan Chen's soul attack had no effect whatsoever on Jian Wushuang. Huan Chen was left with no choice but to lash out his crimson sickle. A red flash appeared and disappeared within a split second. As for Hui Yang, he brought with him a wave of fire. His punch exploded outwards with power similar to the sudden eruption of a volcano that has been dormant for hundreds of millions of years. The entire place was covered in a burning heat. Jian Wushuang's eyes were still frosty. The Blood Mountain sword in his grip was trembling violently at that moment, as if resonating with the surging killing intent in his mind. With a swing, the Blood Mountain sword slashed without any flashy movement. That stroke was accompanied by an extremely horrifying power and surging sword essence. It was as if the world could be chopped into two halves with that stroke. The sword light swept sideways with an uprooting force along the way. The crimson-colored light which was charging forward immediately flew backward, with every trace of its volcanic energy was gone, as if being thrown into the ocean. The joint attack of Huan Chen and Hui Yang had been reduced into a totally embarrassing state with only one slash from Jian Wushuang. Chapter 2452. Stamina. Jian Wushuang's abilities had another huge upgrade again? Huan Chen was shocked. So what? He still has to die. Hui Yang's eyes were icy cold. The remaining first-class divine demons around them did not soften their killing intent at all. Suddenly, boom, 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 boom. A barrage of attacks was unleashed toward Jian Wushuang from every direction. Each of those extremely overpowering attacks was issued by first-class divine demons, and there were about 50 of them. Even though there was no formation involved, the energy of those attacks could still be described as horrifying despite not being completely focused. At least none of them was able to assert their survival after facing such a counterattack. The only thing they could do was taking out and breaking their safety token to escape. As for Jian Wushuang, he indeed had a safety token in his grasp. However, he would not break the safety token. As a matter of fact, not only would he not do so, but he also could not. He had bred enmity with too many sects during his trip into Saint's Tomb and had caused an uproar. In such circumstances, the world outside may not be safer than the interiors of Saint's Tomb itself. After all, Jian Wushuang had no idea if Narcissus Island could completely defend him. Even if they wanted to, could they do so? On the other hand, Jian Wushuang never liked to rely on others, hence he could only rely on himself. At this time, his only chance was to stay in Saint's Tomb, obtain the opportunities he was supposed to get, and use it to upgrade his abilities. Only by doing so could he perhaps be qualified to face those various sections. Hence, he would absolutely never use the safety token. Piercing noises sliced through the air and swept towards him. Jian Wushuang could feel the terrifying energies that came from each attack around him. His eyes were filled with a sense of craze. That's right, bring it on. With a big shout, the divine hologram behind Jian Wushuang was also letting out an earth-shattering roar. Infinite sword essences shot upwards as Jian Wushuang's divine power ruthlessly swept outwards. In the center of the battlefield, Jian Wushuang had completely unleashed his powers. He issued continuous attacks with his sword, slicing, sweeping, or turning it into a wide-casting sword net, sweeping across the battlefield. With the help of space-time law, his figure burst into a terrifying speed, flashed non-stop, and left behind multiple space-time holograms at different parts of the void. Facing the attacks from multiple directions, Jian Wushuang would avoid it if he could and block with his sword if he could not. Otherwise, he would resist it with his own body. Like a possessed person, he rushed towards any random direction at will in the center of the battlefield. After a wave of attacks, Jian Wushuang was still standing upright. Moreover, his figure had penetrated the crowd. Kill? Jian Wushuang raised his sword as he shouted with his cold voice. The heaven-shaking sword shadow swept out in a dreamlike manner. Let's resist together. There were a total of 10 first-class divine demons standing together before Jian Wushuang and resisting his attack. With a huge bang, each of those 10 divine demons flew backward at the same time under the impact of his sword light. A concentrated attack was launched once again behind Jian Wushuang following a deep rumble. Scram! Jian Wushuang's growl was like rolling thunder as his sword swung out with momentum. A sword shadow infinitely expanded to the point of covering both sky and sun. The attacks launched by those 8 first-class divine demons behind Jian Wushuang was completely shattered with his single sword strike. Their facial expressions radically changed upon seeing the pseudo-divine demon Jian Wushuang charging at them. They could do nothing but unhesitatingly retreat. However, in the midst of retreating, a powerful soul power penetrated Jian Wushuang's awareness, causing the exquisite pagoda in his awareness to violently shake before calming down after a short moment. Jian Wushuang's body paused slightly and looked over at the void next to him with a frown. It's blocked. Is this guy's soul defensive abilities that powerful as well? Huan Chen's face showed disbelief. Soul attacks were his forte and the move he just unleashed was his most powerful one. Unfortunately, it still did close to nothing toward Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang's speed had reached the very limits as he recklessly charged toward different spots on the battlefield and crushed everyone present by relying on his sword techniques and his abilities. He unleashed his abilities to the max. Even though there were close to 50 very powerful first-class divine demon genius disciples who were besieging Jian Wushuang, they could not find a way to coordinate with each other since all of them came from different sections. What they had done was merely sieging and attacking. As soon as Jian Wushuang endured their first wave of attacks and infiltrated the crowd, it was very difficult for them to concurrently attack Jian Wushuang again. It was usually a group of around 10 to 20 or more first-class divine demons attacking Jian Wushuang, but he could directly withstand those frontal attacks. On the contrary, Jian Wushuang's sword attacks remained just as terrifying, and every stroke he released required at least 7 or 8 first-class divine demon disciples to resist against it. Individually, none of them would have the guts to fight against Jian Wushuang's sword. The battle heated up. The fight was absolutely insane. Terrifying rumbles filled the void. However, the obviously numerical unbalanced great battle actually went on for 7 minutes without a clear result. Jian Wushuang remained in his peak state as he rushed here and there on the battlefield while those geniuses around were giving their all to attack. However, those attacks did not provide any substantial effects. This guy, Long Zishan, who was heavily injured by Jian Wushuang before, had swallowed an elixir pill and restored quite a bit of his battle strength. He also went back to the battlefield to join the siege. However, what he had not expected was that even with so many first-class divine demon disciples joining forces in the siege, they were unable to kill Jian Wushuang in a short time. The abilities that Jian Wushuang unleashed were unfathomably powerful. It was not only his abilities but also his stamina. Yes, it was stamina. Such stamina reminded Long Zishan of someone. Senior brother Qianqing. When senior brother Qianqing was a first-class divine demon, he was exactly as courageous and fearless when facing a peak divine demon. He dared to accept a frontal attack, even resisting head-on. In the end, senior brother Qianqing cut down the peak divine demon. Long Zishan's body was trembling. To Qianqing. He was a legend among the young generation of Wuxia wilderness, as well as the idol of countless great compassion sect disciples and Long Zishan. Although Long Zishan was also a true genius and placed third in the 12 minor kings, he knew full well of the distance between him and Tu Qianqing. It was a type of distance that he could never catch up on. Long Zishan had absolutely no courage to compare himself to him when he stood before Tu Qianqing. However, he currently had the same feeling as facing Tu Qianqing when confronting Jian Wushuang. Chapter 2453, The Ultimate Strike of Death. No, he's actually scarier than senior brother Qianqing. Long Zishan stammered. Truthfully, Tu Qianqing was skillful, but however great he was, it was impossible for him to face close to 50 first-class divine demons in that manner when he was only in the chaotic realm. Forget about the chaotic realm, even if Tu Qianqing was a first-class divine demon like the rest, he would have chosen to escape at the first given moment upon receiving attacks from so many genius disciples. He would never have the stamina to stay back and start a huge battle against them. However, Jian Wushuang dared to do it. Not only that, he actually succeeded. Almost 50 first-class divine demon genius disciples joined hands together, but could not kill Jian Wushuang in a short time. Not to mention that a lot of those first-class divine demons were already being overpowered by Jian Wushuang's abilities and stamina while fighting him, they also became fearful of him. At this rate, how could we even think of avenging junior brother Pang Tao? Long Zishan was very anxious. However, at that moment, a frostily beautiful woman was standing in a corner of the battlefield. She was Yuaoqing. She did not join in the siege and attack Jian Wushuang. She was only quietly standing there and staring deadly at Jian Wushuang. Everything in the surroundings, including those people and the battle, had vanished for her. Even her own presence was as good as vanished. There was one person left in her entire world, which was Jian Wushuang. In her mind, she was recalling her master's teachings. Her master was one of the highest-ranking elders in the Great Compassion sect who used to be a killer. An assassin. He was such a great killer that he would be called the Emperor in the Dark. As long as he made a move, he would ensure his opponent dies. That master of hers taught her how to become a truly qualified assassin and also told her about the special state an assassin should achieve. That state was the state of self-oblivious. Forget about oneself. Forget about the world. Forget about everything. Remember only the target and the mission. Although her master had achieved that profound state and demonstrated it to her before, Yuaoqing never fully grasped it. However, at that very moment she had her full attention staring at Jian Wushuang, who was on the battlefield, watching his every move and even facial expression. Finally, she understood something. Forget about myself. Forget about emotions. Yu Aoqing murmured to herself, and her figure disappeared in a flash from the battlefield in the next moment. She had completely blended into the air, becoming part of the space, time, heavens, and earth. Nobody could realize her existence when she was in such a special state. She gradually moved closer to Jian Wushuang and very soon arrived somewhere near him. Jian Wushuang was still unleashing his sword techniques and fighting frenziedly with those first-class divine demons. Their battle intent was shaking the heavens. Buzz off! With a furious shout, Jian Wushuang lashed out his sword sideways and struck 4 first-class divine demons before him with the back of his blade. Although those 4 first-class divine demons tried blocking with their full might, the overpowering sword pressure still hit them hard as they fell towards the ground. Yu Aoqing made her move at that moment. Nobody had realized that, including Jian Wushuang. Yu Aoqing appeared behind Jian Wushuang and suddenly thrust her pitch-black dagger towards Jian Wushuang's heart. Self-oblivious state, exterminate with one strike. Yu Aoqing's eyes showed a terrifying glint of coldness. It was a crouching assassin who finally found the perfect time to strike and unleashed her ultimate strike of death. That one strike was enough to cause fear on any divine demon. It was too sudden. Yu Aoqing's appearance was just too sudden. Nobody noticed she was there previously. Only when Yu Aoqing appeared and thrust a dagger out that people were suddenly aware. It's Yu Aoqing. When did she get there? That strike was perfect. What a perfect strike. Nobody would be able to block that strike. The first-class divine demons on the battlefield were all awestruck. Some even had fear written on their faces. All of them could recognize just how terrifying Yu Aoqing's strike was. Her movement was so clean and perfect without any sense of redundancy when she attacked. That strike was sure to kill. Yu Aoqing's attack at that time was really a pleasant surprise. It was just too perfect. Junior sister. Even Long Zishan was shocked by Yu Aoqing's movement. He believes if that sudden strike was to be directed at him, he might not even have a survival chance. Following right after that shock was a feeling of ecstasy. He could tell that Jian Wushuang did not notice Yu Aoqing's sudden appearance as well. It was impossible for him to dodge Yu Aoqing's perfect strike. Jian Wushuang was indeed incredibly surprised. The perfect killing strike from Yu Aoqing was also out of his expectations, and he did not have time to react to it. He could neither avoid the attack by relying on his movement speed nor using his sword technique. He could only allow the dark dagger to stab his heart. However, he barely panicked. Ring. The extremely cold black dagger, which brought an infinite amount of killing intent, was closing in on Jian Wushuang's body. The dagger finally tore through Jian Wushuang's attire and penetrated his skin. But when the soft sounds of the blade entering his body were heard, Yu Aoqing felt somewhat excited. Master, I've finally done it. I finally achieved what you described as the state of self-oblivious. Yu Aoqing mumbled. The many first-class divine demons who were attacking Jian Wushuang were ecstatic when they saw that. However, suddenly, clang. A metal clashing noise was heard, and all those genius disciples' ecstatic smiles froze one by one. Yu Aoqing surprisingly felt some resistance on the tip of her dagger and was shocked the next moment. The tip of her dagger had indeed penetrated Jian Wushuang's skin and went into his flesh. However, it only pushed slightly into it and did not reach Jian Wushuang's heart. It stopped at the rib bone in front of his heart. An explosive power had been projected when the dagger's tip touched his rib bone, but it did not shatter it. Instead, that bone had blocked the dagger. B-bone? Yu Aoqing was completely shocked. My stroke couldn't shatter his rib bone? How is that possible? The genius disciples around were also dumbfounded. Long Zishan was also awestruck. They could not believe their eyes. One must understand that, although a cultivator could practice body tempering methods and have a strong divine body, it was only an external feature and would not help with internal resistance. Chapter 2454. Huge freak. Yu Aoqing's deadly perfect strike clearly penetrated Jian Wushuang's divine Buddha surface defenses and went into his flesh. Normally, that should have guaranteed his death. However, the ultimate death strike was blocked flat out by Jian Wushuang's rib bone in the end. How hard was his bone? How's that even possible? Yu Aoqing's mind was filled with disbelief. What she did not know was that the world was filled with wonders. It may be unbelievable to some people, but for Jian Wushuang, the primordial void celestial body that he practiced was a top-tier body cultivating secret technique in ancient god domain. The secret technique not only upgraded the surface area of his divine body but also included the entire body structure, muscles, divine powers, down to every cell in his body. Each of them would have had a huge improvement. He had succeeded in learning the second volume of the primordial void celestial body. Adding to the fact that he was a perfect chaotic creature where every part of his body was perfect. Therefore his bones were incomparable to a regular cultivator's. The bones in his body were definitely not weaker than those under a layer of strong body defense. As long as his bones were not shattered, it would not bring him any fatal harm. Yu Aiking's perfect ultimate deathstroke did indeed pose some threat towards Jian Wushuang, but she was still far from being able to kill him. I just don't believe it. Yu Aoqing gritted her teeth. Her arrogant self could not accept what just happened before her at all. With her divine powers gushing out of the black dagger and leading it, she immediately swept outwards. The other side of Jian Wushuang's chest had exploded into a bloody cave. It was only a bloody cave. Right at that moment, Jian Wushuang slightly turned his head around. Boom! Infinite killing intent swept upon Jian Wushuang like a collapsing mountain and tsunami. Yu Aiking's figure was trembling for a while and her mind had a bang. Junior sister, retreat now. Long Zishan shouted explosively not far away. He saw that Jian Wushuang had already unsheathed his sword. Sword lights were swept by as a gigantic sword net completely covered Yu Aoqing. Yu Aoqing suddenly sensed a critical danger like never before filling her mind. She did not dare to hesitate, took out her safety token at the first possible moment, and pinched it into pieces. Ring. Some lights flashed and Yu Aiking's figure vanished right before Jian Wushuang's eyes. Jian Wushuang had formed the sword net in vain. She escaped pretty fast, spoke Jian Wushuang with his incredibly cold eyes. The bloody cave on the other side of his chest was rejuvenating at a speed noticeable by the bare eyes. Only within the blink of an eye, the blood cave had completely disappeared without leaving a mark. Jian Wushuang's aura had also not weakened at all. Many first-class divine demon disciples besieging him were almost completely dumbfounded. Such a perfect, powerful and terrifying strike had already gone into his body, and yet it did not kill him? His Buddhist defensive capabilities are so strong? Let's not even talk about killing him. His aura did not even weaken a bit, it obviously didn't affect him in any way. That rejuvenating capability, was that a joke? A huge freak. He is a huge freak. One could not blame how stunned they were. When a normal cultivator, even a peak divine demon, was faced with the perfect ultimate deathstroke such as that, he would probably die. Even if he did not die, he would at least be severely injured, and his abilities would have drastically decreased. However, even though Yu Aoqing had injured Jian Wushuang, he was immediately rejuvenated completely. He cured his wound in a short moment without the assistance of elixirs, but only relying on his own recuperative abilities. The terrifying body defensive abilities and rejuvenating abilities made the geniuses on the scene feel like they were living in a dream. All their hearts were shaken after that occurrence and they even began to wonder if they could ever kill Jian Wushuang. Their doubts grew bigger by the minute as the intense battles continued. Especially after another round of continuous fighting, they sensed that Jian Wushuang still remained in his top form. This caused those geniuses to completely lose their confidence. Huanqin, did you notice? Up till now, Jian Wushuang's divine powers are still at the same level. Wei Yang came next to Huanqin. Huanqin nodded solemnly. I saw it. After fighting for such a long period of time, we who attacked him had used up quite a bit of our divine powers, but his divine powers felt infinite while his battle strength did not decrease at all. How can a mere chaotic realm cultivator have such limitless divine powers? His speed is amazingly fast. His understanding of spacetime law is incredibly high. He can form up to 6 different spacetime shadows at once, and the powers of his sword techniques are frighteningly strong. One stroke from him takes at least 7 or 8 first-class divine demon to collectively resist. Otherwise it's impossible to do so. His Buddhist defensive abilities are even scarier. A perfect strike like that from Yu Aoqing could not kill him. Moreover, his injuries were cured in the blink of an eye with his incomparable rejuvenating abilities. His soul defensive abilities are also pretty strong such that my soul attack couldn't pose any threat to him. And now, his divine powers also seem infinite. Huanqin and Hui Yang both looked at each other and were unable to hide the shock in their hearts. They were exclaiming in their minds. What kind of monster exactly were they fighting against? That monster was grotesquely strong in every aspect that one could not find a weak point at all. For them he was impeccable. If he were to be described in a single word, perfect would be it. Yes, it was perfect. A monster. A huge freak who was perfect and flawless in every way. How did such a freak come about? Huanqin mumbled. They did not know that Jian Wushuang was the second perfect chaotic creature within the mortal world. A perfect chaotic creature was an existence with no weakness to begin with, and was extremely perfect in every aspect. Due to the fact that Jian Wushuang was only in the chaotic realm, he still could not reach true perfection. However, as long as he broke through to divine demon realm in the future, he would be truly perfect by definition, the only one within heaven and earth. What they had just seen was actually nothing in comparison. We had exhausted every existing method. We had used whatever could be used, but we still couldn't kill him. There's just no way, said Huan Qin hopelessly. Yang, who was next to him, also nodded. Those first-class divine demons that were attacking Jian Wushuang also looked over. Whether or not they wanted to admit, the truth was that a total of 50 first-class divine demon who joined hands still could not kill him. Setting aside killing him with a real strike, they could not even exhaust Jian Wushuang to his death with either their combined divine power or time. There's nothing else to do but to stop. There's no other way. This Jian Wushuang is really too much of a freak. Let's forget it. It's only a waste of time to continue fighting. The first-class divine demons exclaimed lightly and one by one stopped their movements, obviously ready to give up. Chapter 2455. Golden Prison. Those first-class divine demon disciples stopped their attacks. Although they wanted to stop, Jian Wushuang did not. Boom. Jian Wushuang's energy surged into the sky as he charged directly toward a few first-class divine demons and swung his blood mountain sword. They were startled and resisted with all their might but were immediately blasted backward. Jian Wushuang, we have stopped. What more do you want? Yelled one of the first-class divine demons. Jian Wushuang chuckled. What more do I want? You fight whenever you want and stop as you wish. There is no such thing. Don't all of you want to kill me? So, let me have an old hearty fight. You either kill me or die under my sword one by one. Jian Wushuang stuck out his tongue and licked his lips while wearing a crazed expression on his face. Madman. The first-class divine demons could not help but curse at him in their minds with their rage-filled hearts. Jian Wushuang, do you really want to fight until both of us suffer great losses? Huan Qin shouted. Jian Wushuang sarcastically said, both suffer great losses? I want die, but none of you should expect to live. All those first-class divine demons were shocked with their rage burning even brighter. It was true that they could not kill Jian Wushuang, but he could not do much to them either. However, Jian Wushuang said they should not expect to live? Where did he get the confidence to say that? However, right at that moment, a surging wave of divine powers was unleashed from Jian Wushuang's body. The giant golden divine god hologram behind him was glowing with an even brighter golden light as well. As Jian Wushuang waved his hand, a few palm silhouettes clapped at the void. Prison of punishment. Jian Wushuang's eyes glowed, and as soon as his voice died out, a huge amount of gold-colored divine powers extended out of the divine god hologram. The golden divine powers expanded far and wide, forming a large ocean of golden divine powers. It soon filled the entire place and covered the whole battlefield in it. The golden divine power ocean very quickly concentrated and solidified, turning in a gigantic golden prison. The first-class divine demons' faces changed when they saw that gigantic golden prison which surrounded them. Domain tactic? It's not merely a domain but a complete prison. It has completely imprisoned us. Humph, blast it open. Some first-class divine demons immediately started taking action, hoping to break open the golden prison. However, after a few rounds of attacks, nobody could shake the golden prison a bit, even when the attackers included Huan Qin, Long Zishan, Huiyang and more. Jian Wushuang stood at the center of the golden prison, looking at those first-class divine demons trying to break out of it without any intention of stopping them. Prison of punishment. This is a complete and true to the definition prison of punishment, murmured Jian Wushuang. Prison of punishment was a tactic within the divine god of punishment secret technique. In his eternal chaotic world's past life, he had seen Emperor Bai using it. However, the divine god of punishment that he learned was incomplete, and so was the prison of punishment that he used. When Emperor Bai used it, it only formed the golden divine power ocean which acted as a domain and tied an opponent's hand. The prison of punishment's true function was to imprison the opponent. Golden prison was the complete stage of prison of punishment. Following Jian Wushuang's upgraded cultivation level, in addition to increasing another half a stage with the help of 7-star secret skills, he could finally perform prison of punishment. Once he did it, the humongous golden prison locked every first-class divine demon inside. As for Jian Wushuang, who unleashed the prison of punishment, he had become the golden prison's master. Rumble. With a tiny tweak of his mind, the overpowering golden divine power ocean unfolded and affected every first-class divine demon in the prison. Those first-class divine demons felt a titanic mountain pressing on them. Damn, it really is a domain. A very strong domain. Under this domain, my abilities are suppressed by at least 30%. This Jian Wushuang could actually think of such a tactic? The many divine demons who were imprisoned in the golden prison were feeling uneasy. However, they only knew that their own abilities were suppressed under the effect of the golden divine power. What they did not know was the prison of punishment's domain causes one's suppression to become the other's gain. As the prison of punishment's master, Jian Wushuang's abilities were enhanced quite a bit as their abilities were being suppressed. The slaughter begins. Jian Wushuang smiled cruelly as his figure, whoosh. In a flash, with the golden divine power filling the space, the many first-class divine demons around could not clearly see Jian Wushuang's figure. All they saw was the sudden flash of a sword light. Careful! Screams of horror filled the air, but the warning clearly came too late. As the sword light dimmed, a total of 4 first-class divine demons could not even react before being instantly killed. Whoosh! Another beam of sword light appeared in another corner. There were 7 first-class divine demons at that corner who immediately reacted when they saw the sword light. They acted right away, wanting to block the beam of sword light. Ring! A gigantic sword light appeared out of nowhere. The sword light was incredibly attractive and bright, as though it could connect the sky and earth together. The moment it appeared, it became the focal center of heaven and earth. It even became an eternity. Throughout 9 oceans and 8 wilderness, heaven and earth aligned. The 7 first-class divine demons' faces still had the shocked look, although their divine bodies had already been penetrated by the sword light, forever losing signs of life. Prior to unleashing prison of punishment, even if Jian Wushuang used heaven and earth aligned with all his power, as long as 7 or 8 first-class divine demons joined forces, the attack could be resisted. However, within the prison of punishment where one's suppression became the other's gain, a huge gap appeared between Jian Wushuang's abilities and theirs. Now, when Jian Wushuang utilized that move, even 7 first-class divine demon joined hands could not resist it. With just one stroke, another 7 first-class divine demon perished. This scenario shocked all the surrounding first-class divine demons. Quick! Think of something to break down this golden prison. If we stay here, we would only be chased and slaughtered by Jian Wushuang. Quick, blast the prison. The first-class divine demons attacked with everything they had. However, they underestimated the golden prison's sturdiness. Precisely speaking, they had underestimated one of 7 Stars Black Sect's strongest secret techniques. 7 Stars Black Sect was the ancient god realm #1 sect. For the divine god of punishment to be acknowledged as one of the strongest secret techniques of such a sect, it enjoyed great fame in the ancient god realm. The prison of punishment move within it was also especially famous. Chapter 2456. Who dared to fight the execution of the divine god of punishment spelled Jian Wushuang's strength? As long as the golden prison's form was rigid and strong, those first-class divine demons could never break it unless they formed a coalition to strike an attack. Although those first-class divine demons were painstakingly bombarding the golden prison's surface, their attacks were very scattered and not concentrated at one point. They only managed to cause vibrational waves on the golden prison, which was far from collapsing the golden prison. While they were firing attacks at the golden prison, Jian Wushuang went with his full strength and continued his wild massacre. Under the prison of punishment's influence, his strength skyrocketed while his speed was much faster than before. His sword skills were even more terrifying. Those first-class divine demons whose strength had been greatly suppressed could hardly stop Jian Wushuang's terrifying sword skill. Ugh! A token appeared in Huan Chen's hand as he lightly sighed. "Huan Chen, are you going?" Huiyang looked over in surprise. With a hint of helplessness in his heart, Huan Chen said, "You too smash the safety token. Jian Wushuang's abilities have completely exceeded our understanding. In the golden prison he's like a master. I'm afraid that only an ultimate god can take initiative to forcefully annihilate this prison and kill him. If we continue staying in this prison, we'll only be killed by him one after another. Crushing the safety token may render us losing the opportunity to be enlightened by the Fengtian scroll and visit the divine power ocean, but it is better than losing our lives." After finishing his statement, Huan Chen ignored Huiyang's reaction and instantly crushed the safety token in his hand. A burst of light flashed and Huan Chen's figure immediately disappeared from the saint's tomb. Even Huan Chen had to crush the safety token to protect his life, let alone other first-class divine demons. Huiyang hesitated momentarily before he too crushed his token. Many first-class divine demons who were trapped in the golden prison took out their safety tokens and crushed them. There were also those who did not make the hasty decision and were obviously still hoping for the best, but the result was Jian Wushuang's merciless killing. Jian Wushuang. Long Zishan's complexion flushed as he stared down hard at Jian Wushuang. Although he had a strong desire to kill Jian Wushuang, he was more shocked by the scenes laid before his eyes. He was struck with stupor from Jian Wushuang's powers and his trump cards. Jian Wushuang seemed to have endless potential. The moment had arrived when even he had to retreat by taking out his safety token and crushing it into pieces. In the vast expanse of heaven and earth at the great battlefield, a large number of geniuses from various sects stayed in the void around the battlefield. They had their eyes fixed forward, but what appeared in their sight was a huge golden prison. The golden prison covered the entire space, completely obstructing their eyes and even their soul power. The disciples of those sects had no idea what was happening in the golden prison. At that instant, finally, the huge golden prison began to melt into thin air. The gust of golden divine powers faded and soon the battlefield reappeared in everyone's sight. Everyone looked around, only to find that there was only one person left on the battlefield. Yes, there was only one person still standing proudly in the void. That person was Jian Wushuang. As for the nearly 50 genius disciples who had previously besieged Jian Wushuang, some turned into corpses while others had completely disappeared. Of course, those sect disciples knew fully well where they had gone. It was just that they found the result to be unacceptable. There were so many first-class divine demons including Huan Qin, Long Zishan, Yu Aoqing, and Hu Yang. Several 12 minor kings joined forces, yet Jian Wushuang single-handedly defeats them. A lot of people have died. I am afraid no less than 20 first-class divine demons have died in his hands and the remaining must have escaped using the safety token. What happened in the golden prison just now? How could it turn out this way? Everyone's eyes widened, they could not believe what was happening before them. However, that was the reality. Nearly 50 first-class divine demons besieged Jian Wushuang, but they were trapped in the golden prison. When the golden prison disappeared, only Jian Wushuang was left. He was the only one in the 9 heavens and 10 domains left standing on that battlefield. No one knew exactly how Jian Wushuang did it. They only knew that nearly 50 first-class divine demons disciples who were geniuses joined forces and were wiped out by Jian Wushuang alone. He, Hong Luo, a red-clothed girl squatting in the void, was staring at Jian Wushuang with her eyes wide. Hong Luo felt fortunate. Fortunate that she trusted her intuition before and did not agree to Huan Qin and Hui Yang's invitation to kill Jian Wushuang together. Otherwise, she would have to leave the tomb with her safety token. Jian Wushuang, who had become the focus of the battlefield, slowly raised his head. His gaze was motionless and stony with a sense of indifference, and he slowly glanced at the genius disciples around him. His uncompromising gaze swept around. As far as his eyes could see, the genius disciples were either in panic or ashamed and hung their heads low. They were panicking because of Jian Wushuang's strength. They were also ashamed because of Jian Wushuang's strength. They were genius disciples carefully cultivated by various sects, but their so-called genius title was an utter joke in front of Jian Wushuang. Silence. The entire space had fallen silent. All the disciples stood speechlessly, not daring to say a word. Jian Wushuang did not speak either but merely waved the blood mountain sword in his hand. Boom. The ground under his feet cracked open instantly, creating a huge sword mark, dividing the battlefield into 2 halves. Jian Wushuang finally spoke. I am standing right here, who else wants to take my head? Who else? Jian Wushuang yelled with his voice resounding like thunder echoing in space. How domineering and unparalleled. His fighting intent was boiling. Heaven and earth rumbled under his unrelenting voice. Countless genius disciples around were startled by the roar with their hearts trembling in fear. Jian Wushuang was alone, holding a sword in one hand and standing on top of the world. His sword intent swept across straight into the heavens like a king of the world. He was like an invincible ruler of heaven and earth with the sword in his hand, ridiculing all sentient beings in the world. Who in the world dared to fight him? Chapter 2457. Elder Wujian's rage on the vast glade outside of Saint's tomb. The experts from various sects were still gathering and waiting. Jian Wushuang is dead meat for sure. Indeed, he is targeted by so many sections. He can't possibly escape. We've got news. Jian Wushuang has been besieged by many disciples and is now cornered. Long Zishan and others from the Great Compassion sect have also arrived and fought him. The news spread among those experts. They were quite relaxed after hearing the positive news. They had to admit that Jian Wushuang was indeed an amazing genius, a monster level to be frank. However, he had made a terrible mistake to arouse a hornet's nest. He only had one end waiting for him: death. In a corner, the three Narcissus Island elders stood together. Second elder, how's the Lord dealing with it? Elder Wu Jin asked anxiously. The Lord has discussed Jian Wushuang's issue with many elders, but they haven't decided on what to do yet, said Elder Lingyi. Elder Wu Jin frowned. No decision? What's there to decide? The Lord should have personally come here. Only when he's here in person can we keep Jian Wushuang safe. Elder Lingyi took a deep look at Elder Wu Jin and solemnly said, Wu Jin, this matter is not as simple as you think. Jian Wushuang has irked too many sections. Our Narcissus Island should act cautiously to avoid being a public enemy of those sections. Currently, those elders on the island are divided into two factions. A few people think Jian Wushuang is an exceptional genius just like you, one that has never appeared in the Wuxia wilderness with a bright and promising future. They think that Narcissus Island should keep him at all costs. But the other faction with a larger number of elders think that Narcissus Island shouldn't be enemies with so many sects, as this will bring disaster to Narcissus Island. Hence they think that Jian Wushuang should be handed over. Elder Wu Jin's complexion changed. What? Hand him over? Jian Wushuang is the disciple of Narcissus Island. Not only did Narcissus Island not defend him, but they are also considering handing him over? Elder Wu Jin thought that idea was unfathomable. Why would a sect not try their best to defend a disciple? He thought that Narcissus Island should at least give their best to help Jian Wushuang even if they were pressured by those angry sections. How could they even think of handing Jian Wushuang over? How could a prominent sect do something so unabashed? Lingyi spoke again. Wu Jin, you have to figure out something first. Jian Wushuang is after all just an outer disciple of Narcissus Island. He hasn't been in Narcissus Island long, and the most important part is that he's only willing to serve as an outer disciple even though he had unparalleled talent. Why do you think he did that? He obviously enjoys freedom. If I must be honest and to put it bluntly, he had no sense of belonging towards Narcissus Island. Why should we, Narcissus Island, risk offending all these sects to defend a disciple like him? Elder Lingyi is right. Although I must admit that Jian Wushuang is incredibly talented, we must also consider the feelings of other sects and hand Jian Wushuang over to them. This may sound somewhat inhuman, but it's the appropriate thing to do. The seventh elder nodded as he expressed his opinion. You too. Elder Wu Jin could not believe his ears. He could see that both Elder Lingyi and the seventh elder agreed to hand Jian Wushuang over. If both of them had that idea, it was not hard to imagine what the majority of the elders in Narcissus Island would think. Of course, we are entitled to our own opinions, but the final decision lies in the hand of the Lord. So let's just wait and see, said Elder Lingyi. Elder Wu Jin scoffed. Wait and see? Now that the battle has broken out in the tomb, all the genius disciples are besieging Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang will definitely not be able to handle it himself. I'm 80% sure that he would be crushing his safety token to escape. However, after he came out of the tomb, the experts here would never let him go. If Narcissus Island doesn't step in to protect him, wouldn't he be dead for sure? Elder Lingyi bluntly rebuked. Well, he asked for it. If he had chosen to be a core disciple of Narcissus Island in the first place and showed a sense of belonging towards Narcissus Island, we would do our best to protect him. Too bad he had chosen to be an outer disciple. Elder Wu Jin was furious, but he had no choice except to continue waiting. The experts from all the other sects were also waiting patiently in the glade. They were waiting for Jian Wushuang's beheading news or Jian Wushuang to crush his safety token and appear in the glade. Either way, Jian Wushuang would be dead. Their wait did not last long. A burst of light lit up suddenly. Is he here? Is it Jian Wushuang? Instantly, all eyes were on the light. The light diminished and a figure slowly emerged in front of everyone. However, the experts present had a strange color to their faces when they saw who that was. The figure that appeared was a cold and haughty woman, the top genius of the Great Compassion sect and one of the 12 minor kings, Yu Aoqing. Instead of Jian Wushuang, Yu Aoqing was the first to appear. Aoqing, what's going on? Sister Aoqing, why would you crush the safety token? Several experts from the Great Compassion sect immediately stepped forward and asked. They were flabbergasted. Yu Aoqing's eyes were still a little hollow. She was still in a daze thinking about the scenes of her fight against Jian Wushuang in the tomb. Especially the scene where she found it extremely unbelievable. She was in the state of self-oblivious and delivered her strongest stab ever under such perfect timing. The dagger had also penetrated Jian Wushuang's body, yet Jian Wushuang's ribs managed to ward it off. Junior Sister Aoqing, Tu Chenqing cried out again. Yu Aoqing came back to her senses and realized that everyone around her had their gazes fixed on her body. Yu Aoqing was startled at first before she slowly said, "The power of Jian Wushuang is far more terrifying than we thought. Senior brother Zishan and I, along with junior brother Yen who formed the four-elephant formation, attacked him together, but we were all defeated. Junior brother Yen and the rest were beheaded by him on the spot. Subsequently, almost 50 first-class divine demons attacked him at the same time, but they were still unable to kill him. I found an opportunity to strike the most perfect attack but failed to kill him. I was then forced to crush the safety token to escape." Chapter 2458. Drawing the line. Yu Aoqing recounted everything she knew. The many experts around fell silent. "Junior sister Aoqing, you meant that when you joined forces with Zishan and the others, not only did all of you fail to kill Jian Wushuang, but were also defeated by Jian Wushuang. What's worse was that junior brother Yen and the others died in Jian Wushuang's hands." Tu Qianqing furrowed his brows tightly. "Yes." Yu Aoqing nodded slightly. "Bastard." Tu Qianqing was infuriated. "Jian Wushuang. Oh Jian Wushuang." Han Yun and the few peaked divine demons of the Great Compassion sect were also furious. Exasperated, the others around were secretly clicking their tongues. Earlier on, Jian Wushuang had killed Pang Tao. He then killed 4 other first-class divine demons, disciples of the Great Compassion sect. Their hatred was growing. Everyone continued to wait. Not long after, several figures appeared at the same time. All of those people were some of the sect's first-class divine demons' genius disciples. Their appearance attracted the experts' attention present. Thereafter, whoosh, 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 many more figures emerged. Around 20 people had left the tomb using their safety token. "What's wrong?" Those experts were taken aback. Whoosh, whoosh. 2 more figures emerged. "This is Huanqin? Wuyang?" Both of them also left the tomb? What's the matter? Everyone was still trying to figure out what had just happened. A light flickered and Long Zishan from the Great Compassionate sect emerged from the tomb. Han Yun immediately stepped forward and asked, "Zishan, what the hell is going on? Didn't you guys besiege Jian Wushuang together? Why are you out now? Where is Jian Wushuang?" "Elder Han Yun, senior brother Qianqing, we are incompetent. We did team up to besiege Jian Wushuang, but Jian Wushuang was simply a huge freak. He had no weak points and we could not do anything to him. At last, he used a special domain-type method to trap and subdue all of us before killing us one by one. Those of us who besieged him were either forced to crush the safety token or die in his hands." Long Zishan poured out bitterly. In other words, nearly 50 first-class divine demons who joined forces were single-handedly defeated by Jian Wushuang? Han Yun looked over in disbelief. "Yes." Long Zishan bowed his head in shame when he answered. On the glade, all the other sects were also asking some of their disciples who came out of the tombs about what had happened. All of them received a unanimous answer. Many genius disciples joined in the mob attack but failed to kill Jian Wushuang. In return, all of them suffered a miserable defeat. There were around 50 first-class divine demon genius disciples and nearly half of them were beheaded by Jian Wushuang. The rest were forced to crush their safety token and reappeared on the glade. Many sects present were angry when informed of the result. In a corner of the glade. "Second Elder, did you hear that?" Elder Wujian looked charged. Elder Lingyi nodded with his eyes narrowed. "I heard it. I didn't expect this kid to survive under the siege of so many first-class divine demon disciples. He even defeated those first-class divine demons in a head-on battle. That's really incredible. However, that also means he has offended even more sections. Those sects must have hated him even more," said the 7th Elder that was standing aside coldly. Indeed, although Jian Wushuang had killed many before, most were only second-class divine demons, not the best genius disciples of the sections. On the other hand, around 20 first-class divine demons were killed in the recent battle. Those 20 first-class divine demons were seen as their sect's treasures. It was no doubt that the sects would develop deep hatred and hostility against Jian Wushuang. On the glade, the 3 Narcissus Island elders could see that many sects were gnashing their teeth. Their eyes filled with the burning flames of hatred and anger. "I will report this to the Lord and he shall decide on what to do," said Elder Lingyi, who immediately left off. After some time, the Lord of Narcissus Island responded. "The decision is made," announced Elder Lingyi solemnly. Both Elder Wujian and the 7th Elder immediately turned to look at Elder Lingyi. Elder Lingyi took a deep breath before standing up to face the many experts. "Can I have your attention, please?" The magnificent voice of Elder Lingyi echoing over the entire glade. All the experts gave Elder Lingyi their attention. Their eyes were cold as they stared at Elder Lingi. That was understandable. After all, Jian Wushuang, who was from Narcissus Island, had killed so many genius disciples in the tomb. With that, he had gotten on the wrong side of those sections. It was obvious that those sects would channel their anger and hatred towards Narcissus Island. Elder Lingi pulled himself up taller and solemnly said, "Everyone, although Jian Wushuang comes from Narcissus Island, he has not been with us for a long time. He has always been very low-key, not showing much of his capabilities. We don't know that he's capable of being so cruel and committing such heinous acts. Such a person is not worthy to be a disciple of Narcissus Island. Hence, after discussing with the elders, we have decided to expel him from Narcissus Island. From now on, Narcissus Island will no longer be held accountable for his conduct and behavior. We would not be responsible for his life or death. We would also like to humbly apologize for all the troubles and pains that he has caused in the saint's tomb. We are sorry for the losses that all of you have encountered due to his frantic killing." All the experts scoffed in their hearts after hearing Elder Ling's words. They squint their eyes dismissively. At least, Narcissus Island is sensible. The Lord of Narcissus Island is not stupid. Knowing that Jian Wushuang has caused public outrage, he would be gambling the fate of Narcissus Island if he chooses to defend Jian Wushuang. That would have taken a toll on Narcissus Island's foundation. The Lord doesn't have the courage to do so. I heard that Jian Wushuang is just an outer disciple of Narcissus Island. He doesn't have much sense of belonging to Narcissus Island. Of course, Narcissus Island will not be so stupid as to offend many sects for the sake of an outer disciple. Since Narcissus Island has drawn a clear line with Jian Wushuang, then just let them off. Otherwise, those experts were secretly discussing with each other. None of them thought that Narcissus Island had made the wrong move and showed no contemptuousness over the decision made. In fact, they were no longer holding grudges against Narcissus Island after the announcement was made. They would be after Jian Wushuang for what he had done. Jian Wushuang was quite pitiful. After he was pulled into the catastrophe, Narcissus Island, which should have given him protection, did not hesitate to abandon him. Chapter 2459. Recruit disciples in the tomb. The remaining genius disciples no longer dared to attack Jian Wushuang after witnessing the defeat of Huan Qin, Long Zishan, and the others. They knew full well that they were incapable. After all, there were less than 20 first-class divine demons left in the tomb. Though there were still a large number of second-class divine demons, they were harmless to Jian Wushuang without a strong formation technique. In turn, they began to leave the space, keeping out of Jian Wushuang's way. On the hill that had been stained with blood, Jian Wushuang sat there alone with his legs folded underneath him on the ground covered with potholes. No one dared to stay within the range of his soul power. The continuous killing in the saint's tomb had earned Jian Wushuang the killer and demon title. No one dared to rub on the wrong way. Right at that moment, Jian Wushuang. Elder Wu Jian sent him a message. With a trace of guilt, he related to Jian Wushuang the decision Narcissus Island made. "So, they kicked me out of the sect?" Jian Wushuang muttered to himself, but his complexion did not change much from beginning to end. He was not surprised by the decision. He knew he had wreaked havoc in the saint's tomb after killing so many genius disciples and angered so many sections. Narcissus Island was one of the top sects in the Wuxia wasteland. Then again, they were afraid to have a falling out with so many sects at once. What was worse was he knew the higher-ups of Narcissus Island probably figured he did not have much sense of belonging to Narcissus Island. That being the case, why would Narcissus Island risk offend so many sects to protect him? Only by expelling him from the sect and allowing the various sects to deal with Jian Wushuang would Narcissus Island be able to stay out of the troubles. Not only did Jian Wushuang not complain about Narcissus Island's decision, he even thought that it was a good thing. Once again, he did not belong to any sect and would no longer be subjected to any restrictions. Jian Wushuang, Narcissus Island is wrong to do that, but Elder Wu Jian was feeling guilty. Jian Wushuang interrupted. "Elder Wu Jian, I can understand this. I will not hate Narcissus Island for what has been decided. From now on, I no longer have any relationship with Narcissus Island. However, between you and I, we can still be friends." Elder Wu Jian was startled before slowly nodding. "By the way, where are my parents?" Jian Wushuang asked. "Don't worry. Although you are no longer a disciple of Narcissus Island, I can still do some things for you as an elder of Narcissus Island. I can't bring your parents to Narcissus Island, but I'll definitely make sure that they are safe," said Elder Wu Jian reassuringly. "That's good." Jian Wushuang nodded. They soon ended the conversation and broke off contact. Right then, a faint black air current condensed in front of Jian Wushuang and a blurred figure slowly appeared in front of him. The aura of the vague figure was unique. The figure was studying Jian Wushuang with interest through his strange-looking eyes. "Old man, you finally show up?" Jian Wushuang raised his head with a sword light glowing in his eyes that instantly turned into a violent bolt of lightning, aiming directly at the blurred figure. The blurred figure raised his hand slightly, grabbing the lightning with his bare hand and squeezed it. The shot of lightning burst in his hand. "Young man, don't be so grumpy. Let's talk nicely." A faint laughter peal came out from the corner of the blurred figure's mouth which sounded old. "What's there to talk between you and me?" Jian Wushuang was indifferent. Although it was the first time that he saw that blurred figure, he knew the identity of the latter. Crimson Stone Saint. He was the owner of the tomb who remained in the tomb. He had been controlling the consciousness of Crimson Stone Saints. Jian Wushuang had long speculated that Crimson Stone Saint's consciousness was hiding somewhere in the tomb, secretly observing everything that happened. The Crimson Stone Saint probably had already been eyeing him when he passed the 8th Trial Bridges test at the Abyss of Trials. In the ensuing position token battles, 3 seat tokens appeared at the same time in an area with 2 of them delivered directly to him. Jian Wushuang knew there and then that it was a deliberate act of Crimson Stone Saint so that those genius disciples would attack him. It led to the subsequent killings and madness which he had offended all the sects within Wuxia wilderness. After Jian Wushuang crushed all threats in the tomb and proved his strength to those genius disciples, the Crimson Stone Saint finally appeared in front of him. "Boy, you were born in Wuxia wilderness and I've done quite a fair bit in Wuxia wilderness. In any case, I am your senior. You don't talk very nicely to an elder, do you?" Crimson Stone Saint commented. "Sorry, I can't be nice to someone who plots against me," said Jian Wushuang coldly. "Plot? I've just given you the position tokens which all of you yearned for. That was obviously a good intention. How can you say that I've plotted against you?" The Crimson Stone Saint gave a weak smile. "I don't have time to argue with you. Just tell me, what do you want from me now?" Jian Wushuang asked impatiently. He obviously did not like Crimson Stone Saint. "Well, it'll be straightforward. It's very simple. I see that you are extremely talented and have great potential, so I would like to take you as my personal disciple. I wonder if you would agree?" Crimson Stone Saint said with a smile. Jian Wushuang was stirred as he said, "Take me as your personal disciple? Well, you ought to know that I am good with the swords." "Of course I know. It's not necessarily for disciples to follow the same path as their masters. I'm not proficient in sword techniques, but I have a good knowledge of the space-time law. I can teach you a lot," said Crimson Stone Saint. He was right, an undying saint expert must have known a lot of things. Even if he was not good with sword principles, he was still qualified to teach the sword principle geniuses. As for Jian Wushuang, he was not merely a genius. He was simply a monster, a big monster. Even Crimson Stone Saint had never come across such a terrifying monster in his life before. That was why he wanted to take Jian Wushuang as his personal disciple. He believed that he was not the only one. Many undying saint experts would not hesitate to take Jian Wushuang as their disciples if they saw Jian Wushuang's capabilities with their own eyes. Chapter 2460. Refuse. Crimson Stone Saint intended to take Jian Wushuang as his personal disciple. He also believed that if he made an appearance, Jian Wushuang would be stoked of the opportunity that lay before him and agreed without hesitation. However, Jian Wushuang shook his head without a second thought. "Sorry, I refuse." The Crimson Stone Saint was not annoyed. Instead, he tried to persuade. "Little guy, you might want to think carefully. Although I'm dead now, I was an undying saint after all. I have a lot of good stuff left for my personal disciple, including the Fengtian scroll. If you agree to become my personal disciple, it'll be beneficial to you. In addition, even if you don't care about the things I left behind, you have to think about your current situation. You have killed too many genius disciples in my tomb and must have offended many sections. The experts who are waiting outside the tomb would probably chop you into pieces as soon as you walk out of this tomb. Well, if you agree to be my personal disciple, he'll help you solve those experts waiting for you out there. After all, how can I watch my disciple being harmed as the master?" Crimson Stone Saint was rather confident. He believed that he would be able to convince Jian Wushuang. Obviously, he underestimated Jian Wushuang. The treasures he left behind were indeed precious and were enough to spark the interest of countless genius disciples in Wuxia wilderness, but Jian Wushuang was definitely not one of them. An undying saint had a godlike existence in the Wuxia wilderness. At least, they were respectable in the eyes of many Wuxia wilderness cultivators. Nonetheless, Jian Wushuang was different. He was reincarnated to undergo cultivation. His previous life was in the eternal chaotic world. He had not only seen an undying saint, He even battled before with the legendary Realm Lord. Whereas, in his current life he was born as the second perfect chaotic creature and had endless potential. That being said, he probably would not care much about an undying saint. Hence, being the disciple of an undying saint did not appear attractive to Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang was facing an extremely dangerous situation. He was aware that Narcissus Island had completely drawn a line with him and all the other sects would be waiting for him out there in the glade, but he was never afraid. He would find a way to solve the turmoils he stirred up and not depend on others to save him. Besides, the storm was arranged by Crimson Stone Saint with the purpose of forcing Jian Wushuang to be his disciple. Crimson Stone Saint would have succeeded in his plan had Jian Wushuang agreed. Why would Jian Wushuang be willing to do that? Old man, let's not mention that you are dead and only your consciousness is still lingering around today. Even if you are still alive and at your peak, he'll never agree to be your personal disciple, because an undying saint like you are not qualified to be my master, sneered Jian Wushuang. He was speaking out his mind from the bottom of his heart. He had only one master since he started his cultivation journey, and that master was Xian Yi. Who exactly was Xian Yi? He was the first perfect chaotic creature born in the heavens and earth. He relied on his own powers to climb to the top of the ancient god realm such that even the dignified realm lord had to bow to Master Xian Yi. That was his master. Crimson Stone Saint. An old man who was dead for so many years and had just attained the status of an ordinary undying saint during his lifetime. Jian Wushuang did not think much of him. Of course, besides his strength, the most important point was Crimson Stone Saint's unscrupulous process in recruiting disciples. Jian Wushuang might have considered the offer had he openly shown up and mentioned his desire to recruit Jian Wushuang as his personal disciple. Jian Wushuang did not bother to pay him any attention because he had been playing tricks on Jian Wushuang and forcing Jian Wushuang to submit to his offer. The Crimson Stone Saint narrowed his eyes hearing Jian Wushuang's reply but kept his silence. After a long silence, the Crimson Stone Saint spoke again. Young people nowadays are becoming more and more arrogant. Well, since you are not willing, I'll not force you. You will have to take care of your mess from now on. Good luck. Crimson Stone Saint smiled and his figure dissipated. Jian Wushuang looked at the place where the Crimson Stone Saint dissipated into thin air with a strange expression. That old fart left just like that? An undying saint should be very concerned about his face, but he did not hesitate to plot against me just to recruit me as his disciple? What's his purpose? Jian Wushuang thought that Crimson Stone Saint must have his personal agenda to take him as his personal disciple. Nevertheless, he could not figure out his intentions. Oh well, I hope he doesn't pull my leg during Fengtian Scroll Enlightenment and Divine Power Ocean, murmured Jian Wushuang before closing his eyes. In that hidden independent space, the Crimson Stone Saint's vague silhouette appeared. I can't believe he turned me down? The Crimson Stone Saint was quite surprised. He never thought that Jian Wushuang would so bluntly refuse his offer after he personally went forward to invite him. He was not stingy with his offer. Moreover, Jian Wushuang was not in a good position. If I'm right, he refused because he has absolute confidence in his own strength or talent. He wants to use the next two major opportunities, Fengtian Scroll and Divine Power Ocean, to increase his strength and face the experts from the various sects outside the tomb. Yes, that should be the case. Crimson Stone Saint murmured as he had also figured out Jian Wushuang's mind. If that's the case, I will have to see how much progress he can make with those two opportunities. If he has not made much progress and could not face the various sects' strong experts outside the tomb, he would show up to offer his help. He was certain that Jian Wushuang would beg him to take Jian Wushuang as his personal disciple. And if he is really talented, if his strength soars with the help of those two opportunities, I will definitely accept him as a personal disciple. There was a gleam of excitement in Crimson Stone Saint's eyes. Jian Wushuang is a super genius. If he will become my personal disciple, he will definitely excel with his great potential. It will be a breeze for him to become an ultimate god in the future. There is also a great chance of him becoming an undying saint. Once he is an undying saint, he would definitely be ranked highly among the undying saints, perhaps even stronger than the purple blood at his peak. Such a strong expert would become Su Er's right-hand man if he's willing to sincerely help. Chapter 2461. Fengtian Scroll. Jian Wushuang finally had peace in Saint's tomb as everyone tried to stay out of his way. He also appeared uninterested in the fights for position tokens which were going on intensely. Time was ticking away. The fight for position tokens finally came to an end. Little brother. Junior brother Wushuang. Zhuobing, Ling Dan, Zhong Yi, Su Tong, the other disciples of Ancient Star Temple, and Narcissus Island returned from the outer area, appearing before Jian Wushuang. Little brother, I heard that you single-handedly wiped out nearly 50 first-class divine demons. Even Huan Qin, Long Zishan, Hui Yang, and Yu Aoqing, who are part of the 12 minor kings, were forced to crush their safety tokens and leave Saint's tomb. Did you hurt yourself? Zhuo Bing kept checking Jian Wushuang out repeatedly but did not see any discomfort in Jian Wushuang. Although they stayed out of the battle in the outer area, they maintained communication with the outside world. Therefore they knew about Jian Wushuang's killings in the inner area. It's okay. I'm good. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly. He was a killer demon in front of outsiders, but he played the role of a younger brother in front of his elder sister. Junior brother Wushuang. Zhong Yi, Su Tong and others looked at Jian Wushuang with incomparable complex expressions on their faces. All of them had received a message from Elder Lingyi and learned the decision Narcissus Island made. Jian Wushuang was no longer a disciple of Narcissus Island, hence he was no longer their junior brother. Senior brother Zhong Yi and senior sister Su Tong, although I'm no longer a disciple of Narcissus Island, we have somehow fought side by side, so you are still my seniors. Jian Wushuang smiled politely. Hearing that, Zhong Yi and Su Tong felt relaxed. They could not violate decisions made by the higher-ups of Narcissus Island, but that decision did not hinder their friendship with Jian Wushuang. That's right. Jian Wushuang suddenly flipped his hand and a white token immediately appeared in his palm. That white token was a position token for viewing the Fengtian scroll and being enlightened in the process. Junior brother Wushuang, this is? Su Tong and Ling Dan looked over immediately. Zhuo Bing and Zhong each had a token. Both Su Tong and Ling Dan, who still had none, were keen to get one. I got this token from that Long Zishan, replied Jian Wushuang with a smile. Position tokens were exclusively available only in Saint's tomb. It would remain in the tomb even when Long Zishan left. That token fell into Jian Wushuang's hands when he defeated Long Zishan. I have a token in my hand. Senior brother Ling Dan and senior sister Su Tong, both of you can discuss whom to take this. Jian Wushuang threw the token in his hand and could care less about what happened next. Both Ling Dan and Su Tong started their discussion. They soon came to a consensus. The position token was given to Ling Dan. In exchange, Ling Dan owed Su Tong a favor in which Su Tong could ask Ling Dan to do something for her in the future. One Ling Dan wanted to owe Jian Wushuang a favor. Unfortunately, Ling Dan knew that Jian Wushuang would not need anything from him. It's almost time. Let's get ready to go, announced Jian Wushuang. Zhuo Bing, Ling Dan, and Zhong Yi, who each held a position token, nodded. The four of them found a place and sat down before beginning to adjust their state of mind. An hour one passed in a flash. Rumbling. The heavens above abruptly roared and there was a change in heaven and earth. A huge picture scroll appeared in the uppermost void. It's here. Jian Wushuang and those few people were overwhelmed in excitement. Fengtian scroll had always appeared in the tomb's most central void so that everyone could see it. However, only those who had position tokens could get enlightenment from the Fengtian scroll. As for those who did not have a token, they would not be able to get anything out from their Fengtian scroll observation. The three of you have a good time in the enlightenment process. It'll protect all of you from your surroundings and won't let anyone disturb you. Su Tong along with the disciples from Ancient Star Temple and Narcissus Island stayed nearby to protect Jian Wushuang and the others. Truthfully, they did not need to be protected. That was the rule of Saint's tomb. Disciples could freely contest for the position tokens, but once the Fengtian scroll was out, no one could disturb the disciples who had position tokens when they were in the process of observing the Fengtian scroll. Otherwise, Crimson Stone Saint will immediately kill the troublemaker. The saint's tomb was controlled by Crimson Stone Saint and no one dared to break the rules set by an undying saint, even if the saint had passed away. Jian Wushuang held the white token in his hand and closed his eyes as his consciousness assimilated with the white token. Under the white token's guidance, Jian Wushuang's consciousness went into the Fengtian scroll, which was spread open in the void above. The huge Fengtian scroll had light spots all over it. Those light spots were moving around slowly on the scroll, like very dazzling stars. The stars were connected, forming a magnificent picture scroll. So, this is the Fengtian scroll? It's called Fengtian. I wonder what's in this picture scroll? With a hint of curiosity, Jian Wushuang began to examine it carefully. After a short momentary observation, Jian Wushuang found the mystery in Fengtian scroll. Is this the cosmic mysteries? Jian Wushuang was electrified. He could sense a special peerless power in the Fengtian scroll. This power was neither law nor originated from heaven and earth but the mysterious cosmic mysteries. It was not something that can be found and experienced normally, not because it was magnificent or over-imposing. On the contrary, it was not as profound as the laws of heaven and earth. Nonetheless, its presence was infinitesimal, just like the pores on a human's body. Although the pores were inconspicuous, they were indispensable. That was the mysterious power of heaven and earth's vast expanse. It was one of the main elements that constituted heaven and earth but was not studied because of it being weak and subtle. What Jian Wushuang sensed in the Fengtian scroll was the mysterious powers of the vast heaven and earth. As Jian Wushuang was achieving enlightenment, he subconsciously began to picture some sword techniques in his mind. The mysterious power evolved accordingly. Jian Wushuang was thrilled in just a brief moment. So, that's how it is? Jian Wushuang finally understood the functions of Fengtian scroll. It was through its mysterious power that one derived various things between heaven and earth. For example, it was used to develop sword techniques, derive laws, secret techniques, etc. It worked in many areas and the effect was many times faster than that of self-deduction. Chapter 2462, Deducement Deduced. In the swordsmanship test on the 8th trial bridge, I had a breakthrough in my understanding of sword principle and achieved profound sword principle realm. My sword skills have improved. I have created heaven and earth aligned during the battle with those genius disciples, but that was not all I'm capable of. Fengtian scroll is a great tool for me to deduce swordsmanship using the mysterious cosmic mysteries. The third style of spacetime sword technique. The third style of transmigration sword principle. Among the two major laws of spacetime and transmigration, my spacetime law level is infinitely close to reaching the first stage. Perhaps through this enlightenment, I would be able to progress and achieve a breakthrough in my apparition techniques. I'm very close to reaching the first stage for transmigration law as well, Jian Wushuang murmured. His consciousness was divided into three at that moment. He was using his consciousnesses to respectively deduce swordsmanship, spacetime law, and transmigration law. It was not an easy task dividing one's consciousness into three and using them separately to deduce three types of knowledge. For this to be done, not only must he have an extremely tenacious and powerful consciousness, but also amazing comprehension capabilities. After all, his comprehension capabilities would be reduced to only 1/3 of his usual with his consciousness divided into three. Under such circumstances, it would normally be less effective compared to concentrating on deducing only one type of knowledge. Therefore, many cultivators including many geniuses would not dare go down that road. Yet Jian Wushuang did not hesitate. As a perfect chaotic creature, he had excellent comprehension capabilities. Jian Wushuang was in full concentration mode and indulged himself in Fengtian scroll's enlightenment process. Zhuobing, Ling Dan, and Zhong Yi who were next to him also did the same. No one would be willing to waste this once-in-lifetime opportunity. They would seize this time to improve their powers as much as possible. In the hidden and independent space, Crimson Stone Saint casually stood there but cast his eyes on Jian Wushuang from time to time. He did not bother giving his attention to the other geniuses. I went through a lot to get hold of just this one scroll and was miserably hunted down such that even my death was related to this Fengtian scroll. What an advantage to this brat, murmured Crimson Stone Saint. He knew very well the merits of Fengtian scroll. A single scroll may be of little use to him who had reached the level of Undying Saint, but the Fengtian scroll would be of tremendous help for gods who were below the Undying Saint cultivation level, especially for those divine demons who were in Saint's tomb. The tomb was opened many times in the past and many disciples had gained a lot of benefit through the process of enlightenment when they looked at the Fengtian scroll every single time. Jian Wushuang is so talented. I wonder how much improvement he will have after meditating upon this Fengtian scroll? Crimson Stone Saint had very high expectations for Jian Wushuang. Time very slowly went by as Jian Wushuang and the rest meditated. Fengtian scroll was only available for 10 days each time it was opened up and those 10 days slipped away in the blink of an eye. As soon as the time was up, the huge scroll in the void above immediately folded up, melted away and disappeared. Zhuobing, Ling Dan and Zhong Yi had also regained their consciousness on that hill. Ling Dan let out a breath as he opened up his eyes which were filled with happiness. It was obvious that he had gained a lot during his 10 days of meditation. Junior sister, have you gained a lot? Ling Dan walked up to Zhuobing. I've benefited a lot. It was comparable to about 10 years or even decades of hard work. Most importantly, I'll no longer have any obstacles on my path to achieve peak divine demon realm. After absorbing the divine powers from the divine power ocean, I should be able to make a breakthrough to the peak divine demon realm after returning to Ancient Star Temple, said Zhuobing with a wide grin. Really? Congratulations, junior sister. Ling Dan congratulated Zhuobing. Both of you seem to have gained a lot. Zhongyi, who joined them, was also beaming widely. "Brother Zhongyi, I'm sure that you have gained no less than us," said Ling Dan with a smile. The three of them exchanged brief greetings before all of them looked at Jian Wushuang, who was next to them. "That Fengtian scroll is gone, yet junior brother Wushuang is still meditating?" Zhongyi exclaimed in surprise. "Brother Wushuang should have gotten some enlightenment. Let's just wait here and not disturb him," said Ling Dan. The three of them waited until Jian Wushuang, who had been sitting cross-legged, finally opened his eyes. Jian Wushuang soon joined the three of them. "Little brother, how do you feel?" Zhuo Bing asked. "Not bad." Jian Wushuang smiled slightly. Of course he was just being modest. Zhuo Bing, Ling Dan, and Zhongyi had tremendous gains after 10 days of meditation. Jian Wushuang should have gotten a lot more since he had stronger comprehension capabilities compared to the three of them. Besides, he was deducing 3 types of knowledge, swordsmanship, spacetime law, and transmigration law, at the same time. The insights he gained after 10 days in those 3 aspects exceeded his expectations. He had made advancements by leaps and bounds. "I understand now why those genius disciples paid so much attention to the Fengtian scroll viewing position tokens and even fought for it with their lives," Jian Wushuang thought to himself. Even he had to admit that the Fengtian scroll had greatly helped him to an extent that tantamounts to a great deal of luck. Luck and opportunities were greatly sought after by the masses. After Fengtian scroll, Divine Power Ocean should be next, Jian Wushuang murmured with his eyes gleaming with excitement. Divine Power Ocean was the most common opportunity available in Saint's Tomb. The purple amulets needed to enter the Divine Power Ocean were easier to obtain, hence almost everyone could get into the ocean and spend time there. However, Jian Wushuang's expectation towards the Divine Power Ocean was only second to the enlightenment of the Fengtian scroll. That opportunity came on time, especially when he was being targeted by those experts from other sects outside the tomb. It was likely those experts would dash up to him once he exited the tomb. Besides first-class divine demons, there were also a large number of peak divine demons. Jian Wushuang could not handle the mob with his current strength. Therefore, there was only one way out if Jian Wushuang hoped to survive this crisis on his own. That was to get into the Divine Power Ocean and absorb the divine powers in there to enhance the divine powers within his body and break through to the divine demon realm. Once he achieved the divine demon realm, he would be a truly complete perfect chaotic creature which would help him fend off the crisis that was waiting for him outside. Fengtian scroll didn't disappoint me. I hope that the Divine Power Ocean will also not let me down. Jian Wushuang was electrified and had unconsciously clasped his hands together. Chapter 2463, Divine Power Ocean Boom. The earth trembled and suddenly cracked open. The ground sank at an astonishing speed right in the middle of the tomb's inner area as majestic divine powers surged out wildly from the sunken ground. In just a few moments, an infinite ocean of divine powers was formed. Many genius disciples who were still staying in the tomb noticed changes on the ground. "Has it started?" The disciples were thrilled. For those disciples who were only at second-class divine demon realm, they had limited opportunities in the tomb. They had no hope of fighting for the position tokens. Likewise, their chances to pass through any of the tests at the abyss of trials were also slim. Under those circumstances they could only try their luck. And the only opportunity achievable within their means was the Divine Power Ocean. "That's the Divine Power Ocean. Let's go there quickly," said Ling Dan. Those people from Ancient Star Temple, Narcissus Island, and Jian Wushuang immediately went forth. They soon arrived in the middle of the inner area and found the grounds of the huge area had disappeared only to be replaced by a vast divine power ocean. They could sense the ancient god divine power surging powerfully within the ocean. This is the Divine Power Ocean. Its divine power is immense. How generous of Crimson Stone Saint. I've never experienced such intense ancient god divine power in my life. Ling Dan, Zhuo Bing, and the others expressed their admiration at the sight of the ocean. Even Jian Wushuang was startled when he saw the Divine Power Ocean. Every single drop of ancient god divine power contained pure and authentic divine powers which were extremely useful to cultivators. One of the bounty rewards for Jian Wushuang was 10,000 drops of ancient god divine power. 10,000 drops were not a small amount. Many powerful peak divine demons were unable to deliver that much power. However, that was merely a drop in an ocean compared to the Divine Power Ocean which laid in front of their eyes. The ancient god divine power drops within must be astronomical in such a huge ocean. This could only be delivered by Crimson Stone Saint who had reached the Undying Saint level. As for other people, even with hellacious efforts by several prominent sects in Wuxia wilderness like the Great Compassion sect, It was unlikely for them to have accumulated even 1% of the ocean's divine powers. The rule of Saint's Tomb states that whoever owns purple amulets can enter this divine power ocean to absorb as much ancient god divine power as possible. It depends on our abilities to absorb the powers within, but we are not allowed to take divine powers out from the tomb. No one dared to violate this rule. After all, Crimson Stone Saint's consciousness might be secretly observing our behavior, said Ling Dan. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly but immediately asked, "Do all of you have enough purple amulets? I have a lot here if you need them." With a simple wave of his hand, dozens of purple amulets appeared. Jian Wushuang had fought many genius disciples. Whether those disciples were killed or fled the tomb with their safety tokens, they could not take those purple amulets with them. Naturally, those purple amulets were left behind and fell into Jian Wushuang's hands. Although Jian Wushuang previously gave some of the purple amulets to Ice Fire God Palace disciples, he still had a lot left. According to the rules, one purple amulet was equivalent to a pass to stay in the divine power ocean for 1 month. Jian Wushuang had enough purple amulets for him to stay in the ocean for several years or even up to a decade. He certainly did not need so many of them. The disciples of Ancient Star Temple and Narcissus Island were delighted by his offer. They did not hesitate to take some of those purple amulets from Jian Wushuang. "Let's get started," said Zhongyi. They wasted no time and directly plunged into the vast ocean one after another. As soon as they got into the divine power ocean, they could feel the strong current of ancient god divine powers approaching from all directions. "That's a lot of divine powers. It's enough for all of us to take in as much as we can." Those disciples were excited as they got started and began absorbing and refining the ancient god divine powers around them, each working with different techniques. Jian Wushuang was among those disciples in the ocean. He wore a smile on his face as he felt the inexhaustible ancient god divine powers from his surroundings. "In fact, I've achieved the divine demon realm a long time ago. What's lacking is the accumulation of divine powers, and now I have such an immense ancient god divine power in front of me. Let's start." Jian Wushuang also did not waste any more time. The pores all over his body were completely opened as a terrifying suction force instantly emerged from him. Wham! The wild power surges swirled around Jian Wushuang in sloshing chaos. An infinite amount of ancient god divine powers closed in around Jian Wushuang under the influence of his suction power. Jian Wushuang absorbed and refined them at an astounding speed. He was working at a speed that was 10 times faster than any first or second class divine demons that were present. Zhuobing, Ling Dan, and the others who were around Jian Wushuang were also focusing on absorbing as much divine power as possible. However, all of them looked over at Jian Wushuang and they noticed the rapid current movement around him. The speed, my goodness! What a terrifying speed! Usually the higher one's cultivation level, the faster one could absorb and refine divine power. That doesn't seem to be applicable to Brother Wushuang. Even though I am a first-class divine demon, my speed is merely 1/10 of Brother Wushuang? He must be a monster. The disciples of Ancient Star Temple and Narcissus Island were amazed by Jian Wushuang's abilities. They had been taken aback countless times by the abilities and performance of Jian Wushuang since entering Saint's Tomb. Therefore they were not surprised by Jian Wushuang being able to absorb and refine divine power dozens of times faster than themselves. With the speed which he's working with, we'll only be distracted if we stay too close to him. "Let's go somewhere else and leave this area for Junior Brother Wushuang," suggested Zhongyi. All of them nodded in unison. The divine power ocean was huge and they had only been in a small part of it. They would not be affected if everyone around them was absorbing at similar speeds. However, Jian Wushuang was absorbing so fast that none of them could match his pace. The divine powers would be attracted over to his side, which would greatly affect the other disciples around the area. They had no choice but to move to other areas. Chapter 2464, Breakthrough. The atmosphere had considerably calmed down in Saint's Tomb. The various sects' genius disciples were indulging in the divine power ocean and absorbing as much divine power as possible. The day slowly passed and soon it had been 3 months. 2 silhouettes stood next to each other on the edge of the vast divine power ocean. "Congratulations, Junior Brother, on your breakthrough to first-class divine demon realm," said a smiling young man with long purple hair. "Haha, that was pure luck. I was only 1 step away from first-class divine demon realm. When I tried to overcome one of the trial bridges tests, I learned something and met the requirements for a breakthrough. What I lacked were some divine powers. I've been absorbing a fair bit of divine power for the last 3 months, hence I attempted a breakthrough to the first-class divine demon realm and made it." The chubby young man smiled heartily. The divine power ocean was very useful. Besides the accumulation of divine powers, one could also attempt to break through in one's cultivation bottleneck by absorbing a large amount of divine power. However, such breakthroughs were only applicable to first-class divine demons or lower. After all, the highest level that could be admitted into Saint's Tomb was first-class divine demons, hence first-class divine demons were unable to progress to peak divine demon realm in the tomb, but second-class divine demons could try advancing into the first-class divine demon realm. The chubby young man took advantage of the divine power ocean and easily achieved first-class divine demon realm. Both of them were chit-chatting casually while walking as they passed the area where Jian Wushuang was. The strong turbulence waves around Jian Wushuang caught their attention. That absorption power is really quick and the waters around are choppy. Both of them stopped in their tracks, looked over, and immediately spotted Jian Wushuang who was in that area. It's him. It's the monstrous Jian Wushuang. No wonder. A trace of fear flashed in their eyes. They had seen Jian Wushuang's mass killings with their own eyes. All the various sect's genius disciples in the tomb had developed tremendous fear for Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang's divine power absorption speed is too fast. If he has been going on at this pace for the past 3 months, then he must have acquired an incredible amount of divine power. It's strange he hasn't broken through yet. He's obviously still in the chaotic realm, isn't he? Both of them were flabbergasted. Let him be. Jian Wushuang is indeed a large monstrous freak. Let's not stay here, said the purple long-haired young man. Yes, let's move along. The two dared not delay and escaped as quickly as possible. They would not have been so frightened if they met someone else. Before Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang was already recognized as the Grim Reaper of the tomb and offended countless sections. Under such circumstances, Jian Wushuang might just kill them without any scruples if they rubbed him the wrong way. After the two left, Jian Wushuang remained there and continued absorbing the ancient god divine powers. Exactly as what the two had seen, Jian Wushuang had been absorbing the ancient god divine power at lightning speeds for 3 months. Apparently, an ordinary chaotic realm would probably reach the upper limit in 3 days, but Jian Wushuang was different. He was a perfect chaotic creature whereby his divine powers were limitless. He needed a large volume of divine power to advance from the peak chaotic realm to divine demon realm, hence he definitely needed more divine power as compared to an ordinary peak chaotic realm. After insanely absorbing for 3 months, he had finally reached his power accumulation limit. At that point, Jian Wushuang stopped absorbing the divine powers around him. Jian Wushuang was stoked. I've reached the limit in power accumulation and there's no possibility of any further improvement. It's time for a breakthrough. Rumbling. The boundless divine powers circulated frantically in Jian Wushuang's body, forming a surging stream of divine power. Under careful control, the stream of divine power pushed through the bottleneck in Jian Wushuang's body. The bottleneck was tough. There was a huge gap between the chaotic realm and divine demon realm. Therefore, it was extremely difficult for a breakthrough from the chaotic realm to divine demon realm as the requirements were extremely hard to meet. Nonetheless, for Jian Wushuang, he had made his breakthrough and reached the divine demon's realm in his previous life. He was just reincarnated to once again go through his cultivation. He had fulfilled the requirements for advancement to the divine demon realm. Not only did he fulfill the requirements, but had actually surpassed it long ago. What he lacked was just divine powers. The divine powers in his body had also reached the breakthrough requirements, and the divine power ocean around him could continuously channel support for his breakthrough. Jian Wushuang was completely confident with his breakthrough. Boom, boom, boom. The stream of divine power continuously battered the bottleneck's barrier. The stream of divine power collapsed after every single attack launched, but Jian Wushuang immediately mustered a new stream for the next attack. In the blink of an eye, Jian Wushuang had already launched nearly 10 waves of attacks towards the barrier. A crack finally appeared on the extremely tough barrier. A small leak would sink a great ship. The appearance of a small crack had rocked that barrier's stability. There were 2 more waves of attack next. Rumbling. The barrier had given way. Divine Demon Realm, here I come. Jian Wushuang was over the top. Divine Demon Realm was the peak of his previous live's cultivation level. Similarly, that level was the starting point for a perfect chaotic creature. With Jian Wushuang's breakthrough, the infinite divine power ran through every corner of his body and Jian Wushuang's heart experienced a euphoric moment. That was the enlivened feeling of transformation and advancement. He could feel every cell in his body transcending, which greatly improved his life rating. Boom. Without warning, an extremely unique and transcendent pressure emerged from Jian Wushuang. The pressure did not come from a person's strength or aura, but from his life rating. The pressure erupted from Jianghu, and within moments it had covered everywhere across the 9 heavens and 10 domains. Endless waves repetitively stirred up in the divine power ocean and rolled towards Jianghu. However, none of those waves had really crashed upon Jianghu. It was as if the divine power ocean had a soul and submitted itself at Jianghu's feet. Divine power ocean was seemingly worshipping Jianghu. Chapter 2465. Evolution of Heaven and Earth. In the divine power ocean, many sect disciples were still there to absorb divine powers. Suddenly, with a loud boom, the terrifying life-rating pressure instantly spread and covered every disciple in the ocean. All the disciples in the ocean drew their breath and raised their heads one by one in horror, staring at the pressure source. What is that? What's going on? I feel my soul is about to burst. Numerous cries of terror sounded one after another. If one could easily withstand the oppressive aura of a cultivator, they had a strong character and perseverance to resist, but it was impossible to resist the pressure from life ratings. Jianghu was the second perfect chaotic creature born between heaven and earth and had become the one and only. His life rating was higher than everyone else. No one was capable of resisting the pressure from his life rating. In the divine power ocean, many genius sect disciples were groaning. They were looking toward the direction where Jianghu was and could not help but worship him with a trembling heart. That action was done against their wills, as their bodies had betrayed them and were beyond their control. That direction. That's where little brother is. Zhuobing cast her eyes over at the pressure source as she quivered. It's indeed where junior brother Wuxia is. What exactly happened to junior brother Wuxia? Ling Dan, Zhongyi, Su Tong and the others were at a loss. Nevertheless, they were unable to find out, as they were also unable to move their bodies. In the hidden independent space of the tomb. Who the hell is he? What kind of a monster is he? What's going on with this pressure? The Crimson Stone Saint was completely struck in awe. His expression was horrified and blank as he stared at Jianghu. Even he could feel a sense of fear that rose from the deepest part of his soul under the intense pressure. He was also unable to move his body. The life-rating pressure was overwhelming even to Crimson Stone Saint. It was not something that he could overcome. However, what appeared even more unbelievable to him as that life-rating pressure kept rising and becoming more powerful. The pressure quickly got out of Crimson Stone Saint's control, covering the entire tomb, and soon rushed out of Saint's tomb. On the glade outside the Saint's tomb, experts from various sects, including those genius disciples who had crushed their safety token and came out in advance, remained to wait. Everyone was waiting for their genius disciples to come out of the tomb. More importantly, was of course waiting for that one person. That person was none other than Jianghu. The world seemed to be peaceful during the long wait. Suddenly a loud boom sounded. The pressure originating from the life rating spread out from the tomb and towards the glade. On the glade, expressions of those various sects experts drastically changed under the intense pressure. Who is emitting this pressure? It's so unique. It's obviously not coming from an expert, yet it makes me subservient to it. My heart quivered under the pressure. Who exactly is it? Who emitted that kind of pressure? Is that from an ultimate god or the Crimson Stone Saint? The experts from various sects on the glade rose in an uproar. No one could remain calm under the pressure. Regardless of first-class divine demon or peak divine demon, the pressure touched a soft spot in their hearts and made them want to subconsciously worship it. As the pressure continued increasing and expanding, the thoughts in their hearts became stronger. Their faces changed drastically. At that instant, look up at the heavens. An exclamation came from a peak divine demon expert. Everyone immediately looked above and was shocked. The world up in heaven had changed its color. Thunderclouds billowed from all directions. Thick and deep purple thunderbolts the size of buckets made a rumbling sound. Those deep purple thunderbolts sent everyone who was present down below into shock and shivers. Without warning, 2 of the dark purple thunderbolts collided. The impact did not produce much movement, but an electric bolt formed and swept down onto the glade down below. Boom! All of a sudden, the vacant piece of land instantly disappeared, leaving only a bottomless pit filled with scorched soil with no traces of vitality left. My goodness! Such power! Even an ultimate god expert would not survive under this thunderstrike. This is the effect of just a fragment of the thunderstrike. The various sects experts on the glade were horrified. The heavens above rumbled as a series of deafening roars sounded one after another. It was the roar of heaven and earth. The heavens was bellowing in rage. The terrifying pressure went crashing down and was about to annihilate everything completely. That's heaven's will. The pressure of heaven's will. A hysterical voice emerged from above the plane. The experts of the various sects reacted immediately. Yes, it is heaven's will. This kind of pressure must be from heaven's will. Who is it? Who the hell is causing heaven's will to make its presence? Who had violated the way of heaven? Who the hell is it? Countless experts bellowed. Heaven's will was in control of the heavens. It was the supreme power in heaven and earth. According to legends, in the early days of the ancient god realm, whenever something that could pose a certain threat and affect the cycle of the heavens emerged, the heavens' will would make its presence to suppress that threat completely. It was to ensure that the heavens could continue its cycle in a proper manner. Then again, it was merely a legend. In reality, who on earth had the abilities to tip the balance of heaven and earth? Or worse, to affect the cycle of the heavens? It was impossible, entirely impossible. Even if there was, perhaps there would be only one or two in hundreds of millions of years. What was happening right before their eyes were clearly influenced by heaven's will. No one had seen such a momentum before. The divine demon experts present submitted themselves quietly and hung their heads low under heaven's will. They could only grumble and complain in their hearts. Who the hell went against heaven's will? Who the hell had the abilities to cause heaven's will to make its presence? Chapter 2466. It was born. There was an upheaval outside Saint's tomb. The uncontestable heavens will encircled in the void above with its willpower shockingly getting stronger and stronger. The sect's experts on the glade were speechless and horrified. At the same time, the world went through some drastic changes. In an ordinary city within Wuxia wilderness, a bearded white-haired old man dressed in plain green robes was slowly walking barefooted on the streets. That old man who went through the vicissitudes of life was holding a canvas in his hand. The canvas had characters written on it which said psychic and fortune-telling. As if the old man could sense the drastic changes in the heavens above, he paused in his steps and looked up into heaven. Finally a breakthrough? Ha! The barefooted white-haired old man heartily laughed with a hint of surprise in his insane laughter. Fortunately, the city was quite deserted and there were only a few people on the streets. No one cared about that barefooted white-haired old man. The barefooted white-haired old man restrained himself from laughing and his eyes displayed melancholy. Old friend, you really did it. It finally paid off to wait for you for so many years. Go with a peace of mind and leave the rest to me. The barefooted white-haired old man murmured with his slightly bloodshot iris. The white-haired and barefooted old man then slowly raised his head and old wrinkly palm, pointing to the direction where Saint's tomb was located. His pointing finger seems lifeless. Only a vague golden light shot out from the tip of his finger. The old man was clearly more than 100 million miles away from the tomb, but the golden light appeared in the next moment between heaven and earth outside the tomb. Over there, heaven's will was bombarding the area in a frantic manner. A golden light descended from afar right in the middle of the chaotic will of heavenly way. The golden light formed a golden vortex before mercilessly swallowing the thunderclouds floating around the heavens, the terrifying-looking dark purple thunderbolts, and the endless will of heavenly way. In the blink of an eye, the will of heavenly way in the void was completely swallowed. The golden light dissipated as heaven and earth were restored to its peace once again as if nothing had happened. On the glade down below, the various sects experts were confused. It's gone? The will of heavenly way disappeared? What was that golden light just now? Those first-class divine demons and peak divine demons on the glade were in a state of stupor. They had no idea what had happened. The only certainty was the terrifying will of heavenly way was gone. However, the increasing life-rating pressure coming out of the tomb was still going on at crazed speed and did not seem like it was going to end. The ancient god domain was huge. It's incredibly huge. For example, Wuxia wilderness was only a drop in the ocean compared to the huge ancient god domain. Totally inconspicuous. In a wide territory far away from Wuxia wilderness, countless experts had gathered at the core of the ancient god domain. That was the three divine realms. A dojo that stretched far and wide was suspended in the void above with more than 10 million cultivators sitting cross-legged in the center. Those cultivators were of myriad levels with a mixture of powerful and weak ones. Among them were those in the chaotic realm, divine demon realm, ultimate god, and undying saint. Some were even of the highest-ranking undying saints. Regardless of their strength and status, all of them sat there with humility and held their breath as they watched the person on the high platform in front. That man was a bald man clothed in white robes and he was smiling. The bald man was barefooted as he stood there bathed under the sun. White lights were glowing from his body, giving off a relaxed impression like a gentle breeze blowing on one's face. He sat there and casually spoke, but each of his words contained a magical power that made those more than 10 million divine demons gathered below intoxicated. He was preaching to the more than 10 million cultivators in front of him. Everyone was listening attentively. The white-robed bald man abruptly stopped halfway through. The smile on his face slowly receded as his expression became solemn. All of you, go on and meditate upon what I've taught today. The white-robed bald man finished his sentence before slowly closed his eyes. In a bloodied space, both heaven and earth were covered in bright red. The pungent smell of blood filled the air. Yet a woman stood there calmly. The woman with a beautiful face was like a fairy who came out of a painting and carried herself with a unique aura. She was extremely cold and indifferent. Besides her cold grandeur, the woman carried an absolute sense of pride. Her arrogance was probably because she used to be at the peak of the world. In the void before that cold and beautiful woman was another woman. The other woman wore a veil so her appearance could not be clearly seen, but her body shape was no better than the cold woman. She was fighting with countless cultivators at that moment. At the feet of the veiled woman laid plenty of bodies with blood flowing like streams. No one knew how many cultivators died in the hands of that veiled woman. Suddenly, the cold and beautiful woman who had been watching at the side stirred and slowly shut her eyes. At the same time, in the eternal burning flames, an intimidating devil wearing purple armor was awakened. He looked up at the heaven above but closed his eyes again after a while. A blood-clothed woman in a manner served by countless male servants also closed her eyes. In the chaotic domain, there were no rules and orders nor were there laws of heaven and earth. There was nothing at all. The only thing available was a dimly lit light. Wham, 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 wham. 4 figures appeared in the chaotic domain out of thin air. They were the preaching white-robed bald man, the cold and beautiful woman, the purple-armored devil, and the blood-clothed woman. The 4 of them looked straight at the dimly lit light ahead. An emotionless voice emerged slowly intermittently from the dimly lit light. It was born. Those simple words changed the faces of those 4 imposing figures. The intermittent voice sounded again. Someone is trying to deceive the heavens. I don't know that person's specific location. Find and destroy it. Only then will the heavenly way survive. The heavenly way, the world, and all beings will die otherwise. After the voice died down, the gray light disappeared. The 4 imposing figures looked solemn with their hearts shaken. Chapter 2467, Knelt Down, What a Surprise! It was indeed born. Someone finally broke the silence on the court and it was the blood-clothed woman. I thought that Xianyi's plan was nothing but a fantasy and impossible to achieve, but the white-robed bald man seemed pleased. I've belittled him. Now, it's useless to talk about that. The top priority is to immediately find and destroy it. The will of heaven way mentioned otherwise it will destroy everything in the world, said the purple-armored devil. The will of heaven way can sense its existence, but it's a pity that someone had deceived the will of heaven way, making the will of heaven way confused on its exact location. The ancient god domain is huge. How shall we look for it? The 4 of them fell silent. Indeed, the ancient god domain was ridiculously huge. They were assuming, it which was just born should not be strong, it could perhaps just be only a divine demon. Even though the 4 of them had psychic abilities, it was still impossible to find a divine demon in the vast ancient god domain. It's good if it's in 3rd heaven. However, if it is somewhere outside the 3rd heaven in that endless territory, we'll never be able to find it no matter how influential we are. That's unless it one day sets foot in 3rd heaven and shows its power, will we be able to track it down and kill it, said the cold and beautiful woman. In that case let's just wait. It was born with its own mission. For that mission, it will one day set foot on 3rd heaven, said the purple-armored devil reassuringly. The other 2 figures nodded in agreement. With that, the 4 figures disappeared into thin air. On the boundless dojo, the white-robed bald man on the high platform opened his eyes again. He kept that smile on his face and continued preaching. In the eternal burning flames, the purple-armored devil continued his cultivation. In a beautiful manner, the blood-clothed woman continued enjoying the services of her male servants. And in that bloodied space, the cold and beautiful woman slowly waved and called out, "Apprentice!" On the battlefield ahead, countless cultivators responded to her voice and stopped fighting. The veiled woman immediately walked over from the center of the battlefield. "Master," addressed the veiled woman respectfully. "Let me tell you that person has appeared," said the cold and beautiful woman. The veiled woman was shaken by the news as her eyes flashed eagerly with the thirst to kill. Jianghu. The veiled woman balled up her fists. In Saint's tomb, The various sect's genius disciples were still overwhelmed by shock as what just happened was unheard of. The life-rating pressure which flooded every corner of the tomb finally began to slowly fade away. Those genius disciples breathed sighs of relief when they noticed the pressure was being lifted. On the other hand, the Crimson Stone Saint's complexion was grave and solemn in the hidden independent space. When the pressure had fully subsided, Crimson Stone Saint could move freely once again, and the first thing he did was to wave his hand. There was a loud rumbling noise. A huge space-time wormhole gradually appeared in the void right above the tomb. Big hands appeared then out of thin air in every corner of Saint's tomb next to those genius disciples. The big hands acted fast as it grabbed those disciples and threw them into the space-time wormhole. Is this a sign for us to leave? Those disciples quickly got the message. Some of those disciples did not resist and left. There were some disciples who were still in the divine power ocean tried struggling as they wanted to absorb more ancient god divine power, but their struggles were futile. No, I still have purple amulets. My time's not up yet. How can you send me away? Stop it. Just give me half a month's time. They'll be able to make a breakthrough. Those low groans and moans resounded at every corner of divine power ocean. Yet those big hands did not give them a chance. Those disciples were caught and mercilessly thrown into the wormhole. Those second-class and first-class divine demon struggles were in vain. In just a few moments, all those genius disciples were sent out of Saint's tomb. Zhuobing, Ling Dan, Zhongyi, Su Tong, and the rest were also included. Jian Wushuang was the only one left in the divine power ocean. A faint black air current condensed on the divine power ocean's surface right in front of Jian Wushuang. A vague figure appeared in front of him in the next second. That vague figure was none other than Crimson Stone Saint himself. Young man. The second time Crimson Stone Saint appeared in front of Jian Wushuang, his expression was completely different from before. The last time he appeared, he looked absolutely confident and aloof. Back then he thought that no matter how talented Jian Wushuang was, he was only a young chaotic realm brat. Crimson Stone Saint now dismissed that thought. He studied Jian Wushuang, not wanting to miss a micro-expression, but it was a pity that he still failed to see through Jian Wushuang. Besides, Jian Wushuang had already gone through a series of transformations with his soul and body cells elevated to a whole new level. He had successfully transformed into a complete perfect chaotic creature. Jian Wushuang's eyelids finally moved as he slowly opened his eyes. The moment his gaze landed on Crimson Stone Saint, the magnificent pressure from his life rating came in full force. Previously, the pressure was swept across all directions, rendering those present in the tomb to worship Jian Wushuang. However, this pressure solely fell on Crimson Stone Saint the second time. Without any warning, Crimson Stone Saint's knees heavily hit the ocean's surface. An undying saint was forced to kneel down under the pressure. How is this possible? Crimson Stone Saint flushed red as he protested from the bottom of his heart. Although technically he appeared in the form of consciousness, he was after all still an undying saint. He had experienced some terrifying situations before his death when he was being terrorized and had to give up any idea of resisting or fighting, but he had never been forced to kneel down under any pressures. Never. He was surprised to only find that he could not move at all when he struggled desperately to pull himself up. There were momentary thoughts that perhaps he should kneel down before the person in front of him. On the other hand, the person in front of him was a young man who had just made it into the divine demon realm. Chapter 2468. The most perfect creature. The divine power ocean constantly released a volatile divine power. Crimson Stone Saint knelt powerlessly in front of the sitting cross-legged Jian Wushuang. After my breakthrough to the divine demon realm, has my life rating reached such perfection that even an undying saint could not resist it? Jian Wushuang muttered to himself. The life rating pressure was something Jian Wushuang just attained. This kind of exuded pressure had nothing to do with one's cultivation level or strength but was purely derived from one's life rating. Regardless of how strong the opponent was, whether the opponent was an undying saint or ultimate god, one would be oppressed under this pressure if one's life rating was weaker than Jian Wushuang's. Crimson Stone Saint would not be able to resist such pressure even if he met Jian Wushuang at his peak when he was still alive. So this is the perfect chaotic creature's body which Master mentioned. Jian Wushuang was curious about his own changes and was exploring every possibility which came with it. Before his breakthrough, Jian Wushuang was talented and powerful in many aspects, but there was still a gap from achieving the body of a true perfect chaotic creature. Jian Wushuang prioritized checking out his divine body. His divine body was many times stronger than before. His bones, muscles, vessels, and down to even his Bodis minute cells were extremely tough. As he sat there, he could sense every single cell in his body was perfectly in place and coordinated without any flaws. If he encountered Yu Eiking's death blow which pierced through his skin barrier defenses again, his skin would be unscathed. Next up was to examine his divine power. Jian Wushuang could clearly sense his divine power had increased by leaps and bounds. Not only had his divine power become purer and mightier, but his divine powers could be manifested to a wider extent. His divine powers were already incomparably abundant when he was just at the chaotic realm and was sufficient to support him in a battle for a prolonged period. Both the 7-star secret techniques and the divine god of punishment required massive divine powers as a basis to be executed. If any ordinary peak chaotic realm were to simultaneously perform these two secret techniques, their divine powers could at most support a few breaths before exhaustion. However, the same could not be said for Jian Wushuang as he could last for quite a long time while demonstrating both techniques together. He now seemed to have attained limitless divine powers which were truly bottomless like the vast oceans. Such surging divine powers was sufficient for him to participate in any fights or fierce battles without being exhausted, as the divine powers consumed was nothing compared to his recovery speed. Thereafter Jian Wushuang examined his soul. In his sea of knowledge, his corporal soul had developed under the protection of the exquisite pagoda as compared to when he was at the chaotic realm. The changes were not significant, but Jian Wushuang was aware that his soul development was by far the greatest transformation he went through. The soul was the foundation of a cultivator's life after all. Jian Wushuang's life-rating transformation mainly occurred to his soul. Although Jian Wushuang was at the ordinary level of a divine demon, the immensity of his soul powers and the tenacity of his soul was unmatched by any other divine demons. He even thought that his soul strength was comparable to an ultimate god's. Divine body, divine powers, soul. He had reached perfection in all aspects. Right at that instant, Jian Wushuang's expression changed and a loud bang sounded. One of his arms was blasted off, but it miraculously and completely healed the very next second. Jian Wushuang grinned. After that, a rumbling sound. His divine body began to fall apart. Soon after that, his limbs fused in the blink of an eye and became intact once again. So, I have an immortal body once again. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. In his previous life, he had an ability equivalent to an undying saint's immortal body. After becoming a perfect chaotic creature, he had regained that ability again, and it seemed to be more powerful than before. Previously, he repeatedly relied on his divine powers to repair his divine body. As long as his divine powers were sufficient, he could easily recover and self-resurrect again. Jian Wushuang discovered his new immortal body could rely on his divine powers to recover quickly, such that even his soul powers could be restored instantly. A typical immortal body of an ordinary undying saint does not have the ability to restore its soul. Once the cultivator's soul was wiped out, the immortal body was useless as it had no ability to restore itself. However, Jian Wushuang was different. His soul powers had perfectly coordinated with his divine powers. If someone launched a powerful soul attack on him and completely wiped out his powers, he would still be able to restore his soul powers using his own divine powers. In addition, Jian Wushuang's divine powers in his current life were much more powerful and purer than his previous. In his previous life, the Realm Lord personally annihilated every breath of his divine powers which directly killed him. Fortunately, his master turned back time and resurrected him. The pure divine powers he possessed as a perfect chaotic creature cannot be annihilated by anyone, and as his strength continued to increase, his divine powers would become much more immense and powerful. In other words, it was now even more difficult to completely destroy his divine powers, making it an impossibility to kill him. He was truly invincible. Am I invincible? Jian Wushuang murmured before slowly shaking his head. My immortal body is indeed powerful. Perhaps ordinary cultivators like divine demons and undying saints will not be able to kill me, but it might not be the case for someone from a higher realm. Even in the future, when my powers are stronger and my divine powers much purer and immense, this immortal body may still not be able to protect me from absolute death. Jian Wushuang was very clear that nothing was absolute in heaven and earth. His immortal body may be invincible, but he was only the second perfect chaotic creature in heaven and earth. The first perfect chaotic creature was his master, who once had similar abilities as him, possessing the same immortal body. Most importantly, his master had reached the peak of heaven and earth, conquering the Realm Lord. Even so, his master had died. If his master could be destroyed, then he was also unable to entirely avoid this fate. The only advantage was that only a few people possessed such capabilities. Chapter 2469. Jian Wushuang and Crimson Stone Saint, my divine body, divine power, soul power, recovery ability, immortal body, and even comprehension ability have reached their most perfect states. Besides, I have full control over my life rating pressure now. Perfect chaotic creature. The peerless perfect chaotic creature in heaven and earth. Jian Wushuang clasped his hands tightly with eyes gleaming with intense excitement. Only when he truly became a perfect chaotic creature had he realized what a freak he was. Jian Wushuang. A low roar sounded abruptly from the void ahead, which actually came from Crimson Stone Saint, who was still in a kneeling position. Rage and humiliation could be seen swirling in his eyes while his stare locked onto Jian Wushuang. Oh, I've almost forgotten about him. Jian Wushuang uncontrollably smiled and lifted the life rating pressure off Crimson Stone Saint with the powers of his mind. Crimson Stone Saint then exhaled heavily and slowly pulled himself up. The life rating pressure directly suppresses a cultivator without differentiating their realm or strength. Even an undying saint was unable to resist and was forced to surrender. This can be my ace in the hole, muttered Jian Wushuang. The life rating pressure was indeed a killer move. Jian Wushuang would keep it hidden and only reveal it under critical moments. After all, it would be too ostentatious if he easily displayed this power, as it would raise suspicions and expose those secrets that he would like to keep about himself. Especially when people noticed a mere divine demon like him could exert such intensive pressures which even an undying saint could not parry off. Jian Wushuang, who the hell are you? Where are you from? Crimson Stone Saint screamed in frustration. He began to address Jian Wushuang differently. Previously he called Jian Wushuang young man as a friendly gesture towards a junior. After he saw Jian Wushuang in a different light, he naturally changed the way he addressed Jian Wushuang. It doesn't matter who I am or where I am from. What's important is that I've told you before, you aren't qualified to take me as your personal disciple even at your peak. You should understand why I dare say that now. Jian Wushuang stood up tall with his extremely calm expression. Crimson Stone Saint fell silent. He wanted to take Jian Wushuang as his personal disciple before but had abandoned such ideas now. Jian Wushuang had instilled fear and awe in him. How could an ordinary undying saint like him take Jian Wushuang as his disciple? Crimson Stone Saint. Jian Wushuang looked at him in the eye. You've set me up to fight against those various sex genius disciples and landed me in hot soup after provoking so many sections. I should have hated you very much. You also ought to know that if I wanted to, I could easily destroy your tomb as well as your consciousness. His words sent shivers up Crimson Stone Saint's spine. He admitted there was some truth in Jian Wushuang's words. He had lost control of his limbs under the life rating pressure exerted by Jian Wushuang. If Jian Wushuang had intended to kill him at that time, there was nothing he could do to save himself. Having said that, I've also benefited a lot from the opportunities in Saint's tomb. I made a breakthrough in my sword principles understanding of the 8th trial bridge. I was given the Purple Blood Saint's inheritance. The enlightenment through Fengtian scroll and spending time in Divine Power Ocean had also tremendously helped me. Therefore, I'll call it even and will no longer blame you for what had happened. Jian Wushuang paused momentarily before continuing. Let's talk about your personal affairs now. As an undying saint, you came forward and forced me to become your personal disciple. You must have some special intentions. Otherwise, you would not have disregarded your identity or pride. Go on, tell me what's going on. Jian Wushuang smiled indifferently while maintaining eye contact with Crimson Stone Saint as though he could read Crimson Stone Saint like a book. Jian Wushuang, Crimson Stone Saint was startled. Not only is he very talented with a strong background, but he's also a man of sound judgment. Hence, he found out I've intentions behind my moves. Crimson Stone Saint was amazed and finally came clean after taking a deep breath. Jian Wushuang, you guessed it. I do have a motive behind wanting you as my disciple. In fact, my intentions are very simple. I see that you are extremely talented and have great potential in making a breakthrough and become an ultimate god or even realm lord in the future, so I wanted you to do something for me in the future. What thing? Jian Wushuang asked. Go and help someone called Yin Suer. She's my daughter, said Crimson Stone Saint. Your daughter? Jian Wushuang was surprised. Jian Wushuang did not expect Crimson Stone Saint, who had been dead for more than 100,000 years, to have a daughter that was still alive. Back then, I was one of the experts among the peak experts of the 9 realms of Golden Crow. I was one of the 9 realm masters of the Golden Crow, controlling 381 stellar regions, and created the Crimson Stone Fort. There were around 10,000 ultimate gods, millions of divine demons, and countless experts under me, but I was unfortunately killed in a conspiracy. My daughter, Sewer was also very talented and reached peak ultimate god realm before my death. I've also made her my successor as the fort master before my death to rule the realm. However, apart from a few loyal followers, most of the ultimate gods and divine demons began acting recklessly without my command, and the Crimson Stone Fort soon became a huge mess. We are relying solely on Sewer alone to handle both internal and external conflicts. Not long ago, Sewer visited me in this tomb, and I've learned of her tough situation, so I want to get someone capable and reliable to assist her. Crimson Stone Saint looked disheartened at this point in time. I was initially looking for a suitable successor so that I can hand over my complete inheritance to that successor. With that, I hope my successor can go forward and help my daughter. To my disappointment, I found none over the years until the day I saw you. You are extremely talented with huge future potentials. If you can sincerely help Sewer, it's likely for her to tide over those difficulties. Unfortunately, you are good with the sword and are unable to inherit my mantle. Moreover, you may not be willing to be my disciple, so I had no choice but to set you up. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.